flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That brings us to approval of the agenda. I would like to move approval of the agenda with the following change. On Part B, number 11, advisory team update. I've been informed that some of the some additional advisory team members are here and are willing to stay, but we would, to be respectful of their time, I'd like to move number 11 up to number 2 on our Part B agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And that now brings us to recognition of students, staff, and public. And I believe first up is the Gary Seamers Exemplary Educator Award. And so I'd like to call upon Wendy Marchak, BFT President, to introduce this year's award recipient. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Oliva, board members, Superintendent Fujitaki, cabinet, and listening audience. I'm here tonight to present Ryan Meyering with the Gary Seamers Award. Ryan has been a math teacher at Jefferson for 13 years. Ryan was awarded this recognition because of the following qualities, which all of our award recipients hold: dedication to high-quality learning, seeking professional growth opportunities, union involvement, and belief in continuous learning. Here's some of the comments from his colleagues. Ryan has been a building steward for 8 years. He has been a leader in the communication to our community and our members. Ryan is a product of the Bloomington schools and a member in the community in which he works. He is a leader of Pathfinders, which helps freshmen at Jefferson transition to high school. Ryan is a leader in the math department and creating flexible learning courses, as well as implementing new high-level technology-based curriculum to meet our students at their level of interest. He works to bring his staff together by organizing staff softball teams, and when negotiations times are tough, as they often are in Bloomington, we found ways to keep the morale up, and he rallies over 100 high school teachers to do this, which is no easy feat. Ryan's peers seek him out for guidance and advice. He's always professional and committed to helping others see both sides. Another colleague says, this member does an incredible job of keeping our building informed with clear and well-written emails, rallying the troops to action, and volunteering for a variety of roles. His emails are so good that all the other building stewards steal them from him. So on behalf of the BFT, I'd like to congratulate Ryan Meyering.
Thank you. I just have a few short words. Thank you to Wendy and the rest of the selection committee. Receiving the Gary Seamers Award is an honor, and I'm very humbled. Actually, when my older sister found out that I was selected, she told me that actually Gary was one of her favorite math teachers. And so she is now a math teacher in a different district. So I only hope I can live up to his legacy in that way as well. So I'd also like to thank the teachers at Jefferson. Some are here, and specifically in the math department. They are an incredibly talented group who strive to help students achieve more than they imagine is possible. I find myself constantly trying to live up to the expectations that they set for what education is and should be for our students. Finally, I would like to thank the BFT and its leadership. Thank you for consistently standing up for Bloomington students. Every conversation and every decision I've ever been a part of has always been about how to make students successful. Together we strive to provide an academically rigorous education for all students while being responsive to the needs of the individual. I'm proud to be a math teacher at Jefferson and proud to be a member of the BFT. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to recognize our 2 student school board representatives. So if Allie Anderson and Ethan Skophammer could join me at the podium. I just have a few notes here. A few years ago when I was running for school board, one of my main tenets of my campaign was student engagement. A lot of times in the community we talk about we need more community involvement. We have our wonderful friends in the back of the room. We love that. We talk about more parent involvement. We need parents to be engaged in the curriculum. But what I always said is, without the students being engaged and involved in the curriculum, we're lost. Because it's not the cashier at the bakery that has to take the math test, one less it's the student. I don't know if you work at a bakery. But it's not the business owner, it's not the CEO of one of our corporations, one of our friends, that has to take that math test, or has to take the social studies, or has to stay up late on Sunday night to turn in their presentation that we're going to do on Monday, right? So the students need to be involved. Now, when I was elected to the school board, we got here and we had the student advisory, or the youth advisory council, but a lot of it was sort of, I don't want to use the word tokenism, but I can't think of a better word right now because I'm not using my notes. But we wanted to have more meaningful student engagement. The students were involved. We learned through years of, the first couple of years talking to students, that they're involved in a lot of things at the schools. They plan a lot of the dances. They volunteer for a lot of things. They have their student councils. But what I kept getting at these meetings is, we want to be more involved. We want to have opportunities for the Jefferson and Kennedy to work together on projects instead of always doing everything separate. And I kept hearing, we are involved, but there's always things that the adults can do, and then there's the things that the kids can do. And I wanted to blur that line as much as possible. And so if we look at a ladder of engagement, we say, well, at the bottom of the ladder, we just say, hi, how are you? What do you like about school? What do you not like about school? Have a slice of pizza and a can of pop, and then go home, see you later. That's not meaningful student engagement. And so we created this I came to the school board last spring and said, can we get student representatives on the board table? And along with my colleagues, we all decided, you know what, let's give it a shot. We didn't know if we'd be able to find anyone that had the time. We kept hearing, well, the students are busy. They have band practice, they have choir, they have this, they have that. And we heard all these excuses of why it wouldn't work. But we said, well, there's got to be, out of the 10,000 students in this district, there's got to be 2 of them that are not busy one Monday a month, okay? So this is we have to be able to do this. And so the idea is, on that ladder of engagement, you start going up those rungs and you start saying, well, you can either have tokenism where you just kind of say, yeah, we checked the box, we met with the students. And you can say, well, we're just getting student feedback, and then we go and run with that. And then there's students have their own ideas, and then students have their own initiatives, have their own agendas, run their own meetings. And I'll tell you, when I decided for me that this had met or actually exceeded all of my expectations, was at one of the first few meetings, the students decided, well, we need to meet more often, and they were looking at their calendar, trying to decide when they would have their next meeting. And the other 2 board members, Tom and Dick, that were there, we said, well, we have another meeting that night, so we can't be there. And the students looked at this and they said, well, you don't have to be here. And at that moment I said, this is perfect. This is students involved, and they can do whatever they want. I said, if you want to talk about curriculum, talk about a curriculum. If you want to talk about school lunch, talk about school lunch. Whatever it is that you have as a priority for students, that is what you can discuss. And with the leadership of Allie Anderson and Ethan Scophammer, they made that happen. It wasn't us. We just provided the vehicle for them to do that. And it has exceeded all of my expectations for this first year. We had no idea if it would work. There was research suggesting that it would, but you never know until you actually put it into practice. So it is my extreme pleasure, and I'm extremely proud to present our inaugural student school board representatives with these beautiful gold, I don't think it's real gold, but gold-looking stars. They're real gold-looking stars. And if you have... We'll be doing a presentation here shortly, and you'll see all of the wonderful, amazing work that they have done. So if you were planning on leaving right away, don't stick around, because I think they're first on our Part B agenda. Do you have a few words you'd like to
I
say?
can say a couple of words. I just want to say it's been a great opportunity. We definitely have made a connection with the school board members. Definitely, when my brother grew up through the system, he never had any opportunity like this. And leading the Bloomington Student Advisory Council with Allie has been an amazing opportunity to become friends with her again. Having our older brothers used to be great friends. Haven't seen her in a while, so I think it's been a great opportunity, and I'll be really happy to come back next year.
I want to thank the board for this opportunity. It's been really cool to share our opinions and give reports every month. And so, yeah, everything Ethan said, I guess. I just want to say thanks.
Thank you again. And actually, we can go into your school board, your reports right now.
I think he's starting.
All right, so all Bloomington, the end of the school is nearing. Many seniors' last day is next Friday, and the official last day is in less than 15 school days away. Our Kennedy Rhythm and Gold held their RIG annual on Friday and Saturday, an event to get a chance to watch this year's performers do one last show. It was a hit with lots of people in attendance. Student government held their first ever spring fling. With some minor setbacks, it was still a huge hit and a great time, and we will be looking forward to the growth in the future. Box City Vigil was on Friday as well. Box City is a group of people that are trying to raise money and awareness for youth homelessness. And then student government had their last meeting and announced their new officers for the 2017-2018 school year. For president next year will be me, Ethan Scophammer. Vice president will be Sophie Christensen. Secretary is Evie Doncavage. Treasurer is David Palmquist. And our core officer is Anjali Kapoor. Kennedy is hosting our last band concert tomorrow at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. And then with sports rounding down, as section comes up, we have a lot of big things happening with our teams. One highlight I would like to shine on is that the lacrosse team recently beat Jefferson for the first time in history. And that's the last thing I have.
Okay, with less than a few weeks left at Jefferson, here's an update on what is happening around the school. Last week, Student Council held a last-minute book and backpack drive. We had a great turnout. The books were donated to the organization Bookem, and the backpacks were brought to the Jaguar Den for students who need one. Student Council elections are this week to decide next year's class representatives and the senior co-presidents. After 2 full weeks of AP testing, students are happy it is all finished. Prom was on May 12th, and we had a great turnout, thanks to all of the chaperones who volunteered. Diversity Day was also a huge success. Students took the time to visit all of the booths and learn about all of the different cultures. Many people participated in the peace run from Kennedy to Jefferson. Softball players Haley Martinez and Ann Miller won the TRIA Athletes of the Week. Softball player Ashley Neuenfeld won Star Tribune's Player of the Week. Submissions for Jefferson's time capsule in honor of their 100-year anniversary will be taken until this Wednesday. Tuesday, May 23rd is awards night to honor students from Jefferson. The girls' track team was awarded conference champions, and the girls' softball team was awarded co-conference champions. The TJ Coffeehouse program for special education students received a Bronze Star of Innovation Award this month. Each month, the cafeteria transforms into TJ Coffeehouse, run by special ed students. Students and staff are invited to visit the coffeehouse to purchase drinks and snacks. The program adds to the positive school climate of Jefferson because it brings students together who might not otherwise interact as often. Seniors picked up caps and gowns last week and are wrapping up the year. Our last day is June 2nd and graduation is June 7th at Mariucci Arena at 7 p.m. Everyone else's last day of school is June 7th also. Okay, that's it.
All right, thank you for that. And that brings us to recognition of the public. I have 4 names on the list, so as to not offend somebody and mispronounce their last name, I'll just say first names and initials. So we have Jane S., Emily M., Kevin D., and Tom P. If you'd like to make your way to the podium, and then I'll call for any additional people if there are any others who would like to address the board. So if Jane is here.
Hi,
Hello.
my name is Jane Stoa, and I've been here before, but I'm more delightful this evening. So Dick, I just want to thank you personally for putting me in touch with kind of the correct person who could make some things happen for us. I've been working with Tamara Sieve, who was so helpful last weekend for our show choir annual at Kennedy. This evening, I just want to very quickly comment on some observations from patrolling the parking lot. If we had not been given permission to keep the basketball tournament out of the front lot, there would not have been a spot within 3 blocks of the school on either evening for our students' event. A question that I would like to have looked at when the team meets this summer would be, how can we rent space when we don't have adequate parking for all the groups that we're renting parts of our building to? Safety would be a huge issue discussed as well. I watch families dart across 98th Street to be able to get to their child's game. I know there's a formula for figuring out parking, but based on what I saw, it is outdated. For the record, Friday evening, Kennedy had a lacrosse game, a baseball game, a student council event with a bounce house, the show choir annual, and the state's largest girls basketball tourney. I do believe the right people are now aware, but I wanted to make sure that all of you are aware as well. Thank you.
I'm just here, I'm Emily Morse. I'm here to put a student face to this issue. I participated in both the Rhythm and Gold annual this weekend and 3 weekends ago, the Kennedy's final spring musical. And with the Rhythm and Gold annual, it wasn't as big of an issue because we got permission to block off the parking lots. But for the spring musical, I got there at my call time to get ready with the allowed amount of time that I needed. And I had to circle the parking lot a bunch of times to find a space for me to park. There was people parking on the grass and on the sidewalks and double parking where they weren't supposed to. And so it just, as a student, to show up there and realize that for our final show, we aren't going to have, as a Kennedy performance, we weren't going to have any space for families and friends to come and park. I know I had people who came to show up to see the show who had to turn away because they couldn't find parking and didn't end up coming to see the last show because of it. And so it just feels not good to have that not looked at, to have the parking and those issues not looked at, especially when it was overbooked for a dance competition that didn't have to do with the Bloomington district, and the Kennedy show suffered from that issue.
Hi, I'm Kevin Dehani, and both Emily and Jane were discussing issues that happened at Kennedy. I was also there and a part of that. I have a child at Kennedy. But I also have a lot of work that I do in volunteering, as you know, here at Oak Grove Middle School. And we are also having a lot of major problems with the rental groups here at Oak Grove, particularly, for example, with the church that's here at Oak Grove. What you've heard here today from Emily and from Jane is really just the tip of the iceberg of many of the issues that are happening with these outside rental groups. I met with Jim Sorum 2 weeks ago here at Oak Grove to discuss the long list of problems that we're having with the church rental, just to mention another example. As Jim and I discussed, most of these issues have evolved over time because either no policy exists to help guide these situations, or the policy that's in place, it just isn't covering it, and it needs to be updated. So we've, as Jane mentioned, we've begun some of these discussions with Doug Langfels and with Tamara Sieve to discuss our serious concerns and to see what corrective measures that we can take with the existing guidelines. And through those discussions, we're assuming that new district policies will no doubt have to be developed, and current policies will probably have to be updated. For today, however, we didn't want to just come here and present these problems to you. We wanted to let you know that we want to help to be a part of the solution. So whatever policies need to be updated or created, we want to leave you with a list of our suggestions. And I gave that list to Deb Bunkholt to pass out to all of you. The list includes our proposal of the creation of a new overarching student-first policy. So a student-first policy would do things like give students priority over these outside groups for facility reservations and facility usage. It would also limit the number of groups that are being booked at any given facility when a student activity is taking place on that day at that facility, so that we don't have 4, 5, or 6 different groups at one site with no parking available. Another proposal actually came from my meeting with Jim, who suggested that maybe an advisory committee could be created that could collaborate with Doug Langfels to see if these facility rental fees that we're charging need to be raised. Apparently, it seems that we have some of the cheapest rental rates in the entire metro area. So everybody's coming to us and kind of overloading our system. And I think I had already mentioned to Jim that I'd be happy to volunteer my time on such a committee if needed. Just let me know. So as I said, these issues didn't just pop up overnight. They've evolved over time, and they've kind of taken on a life of their own. And so we recognize that it's going to take some time to fix these issues. So we're looking forward to working together with all of you to create some positive changes for our students with regard to these issues. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for presenting, and be careful, because we will call you if we need volunteers, so.
Everybody here knows that I spend a lot of time volunteering, and I'm happy to.
Yep, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? I have Tom Palava.
Good evening, Chairman, Superintendent, and rest of the board members. I'm here once again. I think this is my 4th time here.
Now, Mr. Palava, we've had conversations before about the board's role and things that we can discuss and can't discuss at the
Okay.
board table. And so I just want to preface
Well, I'm
your
just not
statements by
getting-
that.
we're not getting answers. Okay? That's why I'm coming to you. You oversee the superintendent, do you, or do you not? Can you answer that question?
Are you here to address the board on board issues, board-related issues?
I am trying to get my daughter into a classroom for the last 2 weeks of school. I dropped off a letter to Mr. Fujitaki with no answer from him or the principal. Who do I go to then? Do I come to the school board. You oversee him. Do you not?
Mr. Palava, we cannot discuss personnel issues. We cannot discuss non-public data about your daughter's attendance at the board table. If you'd like to schedule a meeting with me,
I've tried. I've asked you.
you have not sent me an email
One
requesting
of
a
my
private
first
meeting
emails
with
to
you.
you was to set up a meeting.
Okay, that was months ago. So
Yeah,
now
you
here we
never
are at the
did.
end of the year.
You never
If you would like
did.
to have a meeting with me,
You
we
never
can schedule
answered.
one in the next, Mr. Palava.
You answered me saying that Mr. Fujitaki would take care of everything. Go through him. My last one was to go through your lawyer.
Mr. Palava, your last time you spoke to the board, you threatened a
I
lawsuit
didn't
against the school
threaten. I
district.
said we were filing a formal complaint with the state of Minnesota and the Board of
Yes, and you
Education.
said you were speaking with
That's
lawyers.
not a
At
lawsuit.
that time, if you are referring to going and getting legal advice, then we need to pass you along to, or move your request to our legal representative, if
Okay,
you are
well,
having legal
my thing
representative.
tonight
If you would
is-
like to have a meeting with me, I would be more than happy to schedule a meeting with you.
I asked for one at the beginning of this whole thing. And you said, Mr.
We were still
Fujitaki,
working through the process. If you feel
I
as
have the
though,
email, I'll pull it up.
if you feel as though the process has come to its conclusion and you are not getting any results that you need from the superintendent or the principal at your daughter's school, and you need to have a private meeting with me or another board member, I would be more than happy to set up a meeting with you.
That's
But we
fine.
cannot have this
I'll
meeting
set up
here in
one.
public.
Because I'm waiting for an answer. Why should it take over a week to get an answer from somebody?
Okay, Mr. Palava, what I'll do for you now, I believe, hold 1 second, I believe I have your email address in my system right now. If I do not, I will get it from you. We have it? Yes. I'll send you a message right now, and we can schedule a meeting, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, where we can meet.
Oh, I want something sooner, because I want my daughter back in her classroom so she can thrive, so she can actually go to school her last 2 weeks of school.
Okay, I do
You
not
guys
know
have
all,
robbed her of.
okay, I have your email address right here. I will send you a message, and I will follow up with the superintendent either later this evening or tomorrow to see the earliest time we can schedule a meeting with you. Please hold on one moment.
While we're waiting, is there anyone else that would like to address the board on anything else?
Seeing none come forward, I believe we have students here who waited until the last school board meeting to meet their requirement for the government class. Is this true? Raise your hands. Okay. Please come up to the podium. I have something to read here as you're making your way. If you are a student, I believe you're all from Jefferson, please come to the podium. A requirement of our 12th grade government classes is to observe a governmental meeting of some sort. Things that they may attend are city council meetings, school board meetings, courtroom proceedings, etc. The social studies curriculum guide identifies essential standards, one of which is to understand the role and influence of political processes and organizations by examining the role of interest groups, think tanks, the media, and public opinion on the political process and public policy formation. You're all, I know you're all from Jefferson, so just say your name and your teacher's name, and we'll have you officially on record as being here.
My name is Noah Andrews. My teacher is Mr. Chwinsky.
My name is Ethan Dockin, and my teacher is Mr. Trzynski.
My name is Cullen Lachlan. My teacher is Ms. Johnson.
My name is Ahmad Abdallah, and my teacher is Mr. Trzynski.
My name is Henry Grealis, and my teacher is Mr. Carlson.
My name is Garvin Yao, and my teacher is Mr. Carlson.
My name is Luke Leach, and I have Mr. Trzynski.
My name's Hannah Brewer, and I have Mr. Carlson.
I'm Shay Zupan, and I have Mr. Trzynski.
My name's Jordan Hudson, and I have Mr. Trzynski.
My name's Samantha Everett, and I have Mr. Trzynski.
My name's Grant Johnson, and I have Mr. Carlson.
My name is Dante Amato. I have Lynn Johnson.
My name is Alex Schneider, and I have Mr. Carlson.
My name is Nathan Efforts, and I have Mr. Carlson.
My name is Nick Johnson, and I have Mr. Trzynski.
My name is Mackenzie Coleman, and I have Mr. Carlson.
My name is Haley Jackson, and I have Miss Johnson.
My name's Kate Eastland, and I have Miss Johnson.
My name is Jeff Alarcon, and I have Miss Johnson.
My name's Jonathan Pang, and I have Mr. Carlson.
Thank you for being here this evening. At the close of this session, or after 1 hour, whichever is shorter, you can ask for a signature on the agenda from any one of our administrative cabinet members sitting over here at our side table. If you do not have an agenda, it is the green piece of paper over there on the counter. And I believe that brings us now to Part A. Part A includes board business, meetings, personnel items, field trip approvals, contracts, and agreements and finance. It's routine business. Could I get an approval of Part A of the agenda as written?
So moved.
Second?
Is there any discussion about our Part A agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving Part A, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Part A is approved. That now brings us to our Part B agenda. Item 1 is our Board Student Advisory Council update, and it will be led by Allie Anderson and Ethan Scophammer. And I believe, do you also have some other students here with you? If you'd like to bring them forward and introduce them for us.
Yeah, this is Ian Clyde from Jefferson.
And Josie Roars from Kennedy.
Okay, thank you.
Make sure guys' microphones are down.
Get a mic right in front of you, don't be shy.
Superintendent Fujitaki, Chair Oliva, members of the board, thank you for having us. We are going to give a recap of the Bloomington Student Advisory Council today.
So we had 5 meetings spanning from October to May this year. We had around 15 students in attendance combined from Jefferson and Kennedy that participated. We covered topics such as class sizes, parking pass prices, school climate, district food drive, and flex learning.
So to begin, we're going to talk about class sizes. So a lot of the students from both Kennedy and Jefferson noticed at the start of the year that the classes they were in either had too many students, meaning at least 30 or more, or that for one course, maybe there was one teacher and they had 4 of that class in one day. Some classes had maybe 20, others had 40, and so we thought it was a bit unproportional. And so after seeing this, we talked with students and staff, and almost everyone was in agreement that this was an issue and that it affected their ability to learn. And so at the school advisory council meetings, we discussed many different ideas as to how we could remedy this issue, which included cap sizes on classes, hiring more teachers, or creating more early bird opportunities.
We all discussed many different ways, and we thought the best way would be the Flex Learning program, which is already started. But flexible classrooms would help decrease the number of bodies per classroom, but it would still allow a large number of students to be in the class. So if students had a high enough grade in the class, the teacher could choose whether it would be like A or B, then they would be allowed to flex out. So an assignment or a quiz would be taken the night before and passed to make sure that they knew the lesson well enough and they'd be able to flex out. So they would be able to use the current flex spaces that the schools have now and hopefully new spaces that are coming in the future. And it would allow them to either work alone or in small groups, leaving kids who need more one-on-one time or just a smaller ratio teacher to student in the classroom.
That's you. That's you.
Ideally, this would increase students' grades because they'd be more willing to ask questions and get help. So some classes right now have even between 40 and 45 students, so it's much easier for teachers to teach a smaller group of kids, even if it was like 30 or 25. There would be less distractions in the classroom and much more learning would be done.
The next subject the next idea we kind of threw out there was that students believe that parking passes were far too expensive. Parents too, they believe that it was far too expensive to pay for. Our group expanded our ideas such as reducing the prices of permits and other possible proposals. With limited research and further information on where the money for the passes go, the price reduction of parking passes did not gain much ground.
We also addressed school climate. So during the school year, students felt the repercussions of societal tensions during a difficult election year. So the BSAC discussed methods in which the 2 high schools have sought to promote an atmosphere and unity and positivity. We also met with the middle school students to see their opinions on the issues at their schools. Thankfully, their issues were just kind of middle school problems.
The middle schoolers actually brought up the school climate. They had some good ideas. Kennedy and Jefferson took these ideas that we discussed at our meeting with the middle schoolers, and we put them to practice. Jefferson's student council created posters and signs that were placed around the school. These posters had inspirational messages written on them. Kennedy Student Council is developing monthly cultural appreciation for the upcoming school year to embrace our cultural differences, along with positive post-it notes that can be acquired. Both schools participate in the annual Diversity Day, and I cannot read. We are hoping to have more than one day, but a week or two to celebrate the different cultures.
Okay, so the district-wide food drive this year, students from Jefferson and Kennedy brainstormed ways to promote the food drive at a March Student Advisory Council meeting. Some of the ideas discussed were having greater teacher participation, first-hour competitions, which is something that Jefferson does very well, and then also having more announcements and posters and getting out the word. And the food drive has been a very successful event that's been run by the district for many years, and so hopefully we can continue this in the future to good success. And yes, that was my food drive team for the fall, and I think we look pretty good.
Tough. They look tough.
So future plans, we are going to continue with student representatives on the school board, one from each school. So Ethan will be here again, and from Jefferson there will be a sophomore, which is to be determined right now. The BSAC meetings will probably continue every 2 months, and they will take place again at the Oak Grove Middle School Media Center. We're hoping to get in between 10 and 20 students combined in attendance, hopefully over 5 from each school to continue what we did this year. So they can keep discussing flex learning spaces, the school climate, and anything else that they choose to that comes up.
And that is all we have.
So at this point, normally the last slide is, any questions?
Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Hold on, you didn't see it. There, on the last slide it says.
It says any questions.
Really small, it says any questions.
Mr. Burson.
All right, well, I got you captured here. First of all, thanks so much for doing this. I concur with Chair Oliva's comments earlier when he said that just how pleased he was when he saw that you guys took this conversation and said, can we do more? And oh, by the way, you silly board members, you don't actually have to be there for this conversation. So I appreciate what you've done with this. I appreciate the direction that you've taken this. I assume that the whole student body of Jefferson and Kennedy is going to watch this particular episode because they're going to see that you guys can and you do make a difference. And there will be people that will look in from Jefferson specifically to take Allie's spot next year, sitting next to me. So you have to put up with me not knowing how to log into my computer. But over and above that, what was your impression of how the meetings went this year? I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you fill that in. What were your impressions of how your student-led meetings went?
I could go. Yeah, well, just having personally been part of this for, I think, all 4 years of high school, I would say this is absolutely the right direction. What we did this year was above and beyond what we've done in the past 3 years. I mean, just that stat saying 15 students combined from both schools. My freshman year might have been 5, if at most. And so this is definitely going in the right direction where we're getting more participation. The discussions have more content to them. And so I think this is only going to get better and better.
Agreed.
Yeah, I love that the students took it upon their responsibility to lead the meetings. We didn't rely on you guys to ask the questions or start an agenda. It was Allie mostly who had the agendas planned out. She double checked with me, but she usually got the ball flowing. So I just would like to say thanks to her and thanks to the school board members for giving us this opportunity.
Okay, I'd like to ask Ethan and Allie, what was it like sitting around here as a school board once a month when you heard about all the other business that we have to deal with?
I thought it was cool to hear your guys' discussions. A lot of it didn't apply to us, but the stuff that did, it was interesting to hear what you guys had to say, and even if we had an opinion on it, to say what we had to say. And it was cool giving a report on Jefferson, so you guys have more of a student voice, so you know what's going on around our schools since we're there every day. So I liked that.
Coming from Kennedy, I think that we will probably be wanting to work more with our student government because we want to create borderless interactions with everyone throughout the district. We want to be able to have like a fluid motion going throughout the district, and I think that growing with this, I think the student voice will get bigger with the confidence that's growing, and I would like to. I forgot what I was gonna say. Holy crap! It was a good one.
Every
It was a
single
good
time.
one. It was a good one. I love that visualizing and watching over the meetings. I get to learn a lot of stuff coming from you guys, and you guys always like give me a hand, or if I'm not following up, I always get a help from Maureen, or so it's been a really fun last 6 months, and I can't wait for next year.
I just want to say thank you for being here tonight and for bringing this recap of the year. I've been on the board for 5 years, and I think this is the first time that I get to see this kind of presentation, so I truly appreciate that, especially because it's coming from our own students. If you don't mind, if you can go a little ahead in your presentation, where you were presenting about climate, school climate. I had a few questions about that. So seems like you guys engaged in conversations. Was that within your own group, or were you able to have other students be part of the conversations that you had? And I just kind of wanted to, because I've heard a lot of different things from different students, but I want to hear from you. What have you heard, and what has changed from when this started happening, kind of after, especially after Election Day, and what's happening now towards the end of the school year? What kind of feeling do you get from that now?
Well, I talked to a lot of different people from different groups, not just our Bloomington Student Advisory Council, and I know that overall it's been increasing, like getting way better throughout the year than what it was at the beginning of the year. So we're just doing whatever we can to increase positivity more.
From my experience at Kennedy, you see a lot of embracement of the LGBTQ community, or the special ed kids. They all get equally treated among the students, and so it's the school climate. You definitely seen from this year, especially with our implementation of the Post-it note, take one and you got like positive energy all day. That really was it might have just been a fun little thing in the beginning of the year, but it's really actually had an impact on the students and how we interact with each other.
Very good.
Yeah, if I could add too, I would say one of the great things about these Youth Advisory Council meetings is that it gives our staff a signal as to what's important to us students. And so when we talk to our Dean of Students who supervises the Jefferson Student Council, when we tell him that we've been discussing school climate, he's also in touch with like racial minority groups at our school, and he can get feedback from them, which he then brings to us at our own personal school student council meetings. And so by signaling that these issues are important to us at these Youth Advisory Council meetings, it gives our staff a heads up as to what students really care about.
Very good. Now, I know that there are times when students feel like there are some voices that are normally not heard, especially, groups like where you are now. I want to ask you, what have you thought, or what kind of plans do you have in place for next year to kind of attract students, diverse students, or students from different communities, to have those kind of conversations with you and work together? I understand that you get a lot of feedback from the administrators, but I'd like to see maybe some of that feedback coming directly towards you as you share with other students. So have you thought about that? Have you thought of what kind of plans do you have for next year, or how to maybe engage some of the voices that sometimes are not heard?
I know at Kennedy, we being in student government, we really try to recently have a more diverse group for student government. So we really want to get the message out there and recognize the diversity in our school and bring light of that. So we do every month, if there's the Black History Month over announcements, we'll do a fun fact about that. And we really try to bring people in together so they know that they can be a part of it.
To piggyback on that, student government, we have a whole subcommittee next year for diversity in general. We're trying to get a full on scale for the whole school year to get every month have a diversity month. So starting in September, it is I think Hispanic diversity month. So we're gonna be looking to have a Hispanic Hispanic presenter come and embrace their culture and embrace their heritage and teach us kids, us non-diverse kids, their background, because many kids at our school don't know the backgrounds of our friends. And so I think that going on in the future, student government is going to have a huge role in diversity. And so I think you'll see a lot more embracing our diversity in the coming years from Kennedy and Jefferson.
Well, I want to thank you for your effort and for the energy that you have put into this.
Thank you, guys.
Any other questions? All right, so if I wasn't such a tough guy, I'd be crying right now because I'm so happy for what you have done this year. One of the big concerns that we hear a lot is if we let the students choose the curriculum, if we give the students that much of a voice, well, they'll just make the classes really easy. Everybody gets an A. Lunch is an hour and a half long, and people they have this perception of what students actually value. And sure, you'll always get kind of the funny one. They'll say, just everybody should get an A. Everyone deserves an A. We're all equal here, right? But the research that I've read has all suggested, and I even did this in my own teaching, if you ask students to grade themselves honestly, and if you ask students to create their own curriculum, they will almost always give themselves a lower grade than the teacher gave them. And they will almost always choose curriculum that is more difficult than what the teacher offers them. One of the perfect example when I was going through their presentation earlier is parking fees. You say, well, students don't want to pay $270 a month or a year for parking. Is that how much is it?
Yeah, it's 90 a trimester. So
90 a trimester. Yeah, so students don't want to pay that. If we say, hey, students, go have your advisory council meet and you can do whatever you want and make any recommendation that you want, well, obviously they're going to come back and tell us that parking should be free. Our parents pay your salaries. They bought that building. We should be able to park there for free. We're students here, right? And that's not what they did. They looked at the data. They said, well, yeah, this sucks that we have to pay this much for parking, but the fees that they collect don't even really cover the cost of maintaining the lots. And so does it make sense for us if we tell them that parking should be free and then they start looking at budgets? So I said, sure, we can make parking free. And if we lose that whatever $100,000 in revenue, how many teachers are you going to lose? How many custodians are we going to lose? What are we going to do? What are you willing to give up in order so that way you can park for free? And then they started saying, well, maybe parking shouldn't be free, and maybe we can start looking at other districts and see what they charge. And actually, we're sort of in line with everybody. Yeah, and they kind of let it go. That doesn't mean it won't come up again in the future, but it shows that our students here, they have the ability, they have the maturity, they have the wherewithal to make good, positive decisions. And I'm so happy you did because I banked basically everything that I've said for the past 3 years on your success. So thank you again so much for all the work that you've done. I'm sorry to see you go, but we'll keep up the good fight, and thank you for all 4 years that you've been a part of this, you've seen it grow, and it's just going to get better from here. So thank you again, and you have something?
Yeah,
After
Mr.
that great speech I just gave?
Yeah, no, and I
Seems
said,
like one more.
I'll give it the appropriate pause.
Okay.
So that it can sink in. But I was going to suggest to all of the students and everybody here that there's a couple of items, K-12 social studies prioritized standards and grade 7 to 12 world language prioritized standards that are coming up for discussion. So you might want to stick around here and then see what happens. Of course, that might take till 9 o'clock as we go through all the questions and everything else. But we do go through this extensive process of assessment and research in order to develop proper standards that all the students should like and should appreciate, not necessarily like, but at least appreciate and learn from. But it gets to be pretty involved from our questioning standpoint, along with all the staff that does their stuff. But if any of you are inclined to stick around, please do so.
Well, thank you very much, and have a good year, and best wishes to you in the future.
Thank you for your time.
So if you remember, at the beginning of the evening, we moved the advisory team update to number 2. So now I'll call on our superintendent, Fuditaki, and Wendy Marchek, BFT president, to present. And then if, I didn't get the names of the other people that were going to be here with you, if there are any. So.
I'll handle it.
Okay, great.
Today, an advisory team meeting was held. At today's meeting, BFT President Wendy Marchek and I agreed to invite BFT advisory team members to give tonight's update. So Wendy, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your invited colleagues.
Well, the first person you probably already have met is Ryan Meyering. He works at Jefferson High School. Sherry Alm is Oak Grove Elementary. She's a special education teacher. And Ann Robertson, EL teacher at Normandale Hills. So this is my team.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
So far, we've had 6 meetings in 7 weeks. This whole thing about doing monthly isn't working well for us. But we're getting things done. We're trying to meet at different schools. I think that really helps for people to see us out and about. And last week we were at Oak Grove Elementary. This week we were at Valley View Elementary, and we're headed to a middle school at the next meeting.
West side.
We're going
west
We're
side.
going west, east, west, east. So with that, I'll let any of my team members, do you want to chime in on how it's going, or maybe the board has some questions that they'd like to ask the team members?
I'd like to hear from the team members what their impressions are, if they want to share something real quick.
I am cautiously optimistic. We've met a lot. As Wendy and Les told you before, we originally didn't think we'd meet so much, but we have met almost once a week. We've had some very good discussions. We don't all agree, is what we found out. And we're learning more about each other and how to be a team. So.
I agree with what Ann said. We kind of are going fast at the beginning here to try to really get momentum started, this year, and then hopefully we can carry it into the 2017-2018 school year. So we're developing that the ability to have an open dialogue and trust within the room, so to speak, so that we can speak our mind. And I think, over time we started to develop that and feeling more comfortable sharing our thoughts. And a lot of it is trying to understand, when I show up after my school day, I have a little bit of time of transition, to try to transition from teaching into try to discussing, larger issues and systematic problems or solutions to those problems. So I think we're kind of developing that steam, so to speak, towards the next school year.
Yeah, I think so far we've been having some really good, deep and open conversation and discussion about some nice starter issues, things that we could get started with, and I'm quite certain that once things get going, we're going to find there's a lot more, and nothing is ever quite as simple as it seems at the outset.
Yes, we tried to start with easy issues. That worked out about 50%. But we do have a lot of topics and issues that have come actually from teachers and administrators, like things that we need to work on. And they are, some of them, like a workload issue is huge. You have to break it down. It just encompasses so much. And so we know we have our work cut out for us. But it's also an opportunity for us to build trust. I think individually, we all really enjoy each other's company, but to work as a team, that takes time, and that's what we're working on right now.
Needless to say, this is a very busy time for everybody, especially teachers. So I've been impressed, pleased, and appreciate the time that all the teachers are investing to work with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Sorry, over here.
Okay. Yeah, when the board first heard about this, this was kind of a concern that we had, and as we understand it, it's an operational function within the administration and the teaching. So the board is just being notified and understanding what's going on, because we really deal just in policies. We don't necessarily deal in topics of conversation that come up. Is that pretty much clear and understanding that we don't get involved in anything, telling the administration what to do or suggesting something to you all?
No, you haven't. No, we really are taking this from the teachers and things that come up from the ranks, as we say. I think what's important is, as we're doing this work, though, it might affect your policy, because you'll have more information to make some of these bigger decisions, and I think that can only help make a more informed decision.
Good.
Well, and clearly, whatever happens in the district does have an impact on your school board meetings. So it's important for you to know what we're doing.
Commercial?
Well, first of all, thanks for coming. 6 meetings in 7 weeks, that's a lot of work. I do appreciate the fact that you're able to adjust your schedules for all 4 of you to meet, and then the district's component there. It's nice to hear somebody say that the first time you meet, you're not just already a team. It takes time, takes energy and effort, and I'm seeing that out of each of you. So I really appreciate that. Along the way, if you have questions for the board, you don't necessarily have to wait until you have a structured meeting where you come and give a report. If you want to send a question, you can send it to the chair, probably the superintendent. If you have a question for the board, please don't feel like you have to wait until the 3 or 4 times that we may see you in front of us. But I do appreciate the energy and the effort that you're putting into this. I think it shows.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I was going to ask if you had expectations going in, and if they've changed. What are your expectations for the group now? Now that you've met 6 times in 7 weeks, I know your initial expectation was we'd meet a couple of times a year. And
I'm not sure
that's
who
shifted.
had that expectation.
The superintendent
You know
had
I
that
didn't.
expectation, but it didn't work that way. I think it changes because this is new to us, so it's hard to have expectations because this is really uncharted water. Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I think one of the, besides teamwork, one of the things that we're struggling with is what our role is, and how we do work together, and what expectations are out there for us. So we're kind of creating the bridge as we walk across it. And that's been a little difficult.
When you have 935 members, and there's 4 of us here, it's a realization that it's pretty big responsibility, so we're all adjusting to that. And sorry to tell you that, guys, 935 members.
No pressure.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Yeah, so in the 6 times that you've met, have you guys come close to any type of recommendations or anything
Yes.
along that? So is that something
Online
you will?
learning.
Okay, go ahead.
Online learning. that turned out very well. We came to the table with information from the high schools. We had done a lot of background work already, and with John Weiser leading us, answered many questions, came up with a framework. We were able to say, what are our concerns with online learning? As a teacher, you always have that in the back of your head. We were able to talk about that and try to, and I think that would help the district. Then we were trying to set parameters, because we always want to do what's best for kids. And this allows us to have that discussion. So, Mr. Weiser can add if he'd like to. He's happy.
So if you wanted to move my board presentation up a few weeks, there's a slide in the number, what now is number 8, Next Technologies for Learning report about the online learning. The culmination of that plan came together under the advisement of the advisory. That is, what are the questions and concerns we need to develop in a development year? Like Wendy said, it's a large topic. Large topics aren't easily resolved. And so we bit off a sizable chunk as a group, looked at the biggest concerns, and were able to incorporate those into a plan. So you'll hear more about that during our presentation.
We'll be the feedback loop, too, as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak personally as someone who's quite involved in the online learning portion and kind of pushing forward for next year. I mean, so I do hear a lot of concerns from my coworkers, and so I was able to bring them to this group, and I have confidence that, you know, my voice and our voice as teachers has been heard, you know, and also confidence that, you know, we as a advisory team understand that, you know, there's not a stamp and a check mark and a box that's done, you know, as far as online learning is concerned. It's you know, you bite off a chunk of it, as John said. So you try to get that done, and then you can take the next step and have another conversation and take another step. So.
But I did like how Ryan just said that he's confident that our voices have been heard, and I do think that is happening.
Good. And then my other basic question is, do you plan on continuing this breakneck speed of meeting every week, and are you going to do it over the summer?
No.
No?
We're going to take a little time in the summer.
Couple weeks at least.
Couple weeks at least, yeah. It's a huge topic list that we're going to have to manage of what we're going to do and how we're going to break off the chunks, because we can't go at this pace.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks, maybe, but yeah.
That is
at
on
this
our
pace.
agenda for our next meeting, is 2017-18 meeting logistics, so.
Yes, and we are going to continue through next year, so.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for your hard work on this. I know this is something that we've all trying to work through over this last year, and couldn't be more pleased, I guess, with this.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I know when we were talking about it as adding as an item to the contract, it was like, okay, well, what are they gonna do, right? And so, and you know, how do you create this advisory team that's not duplicating work that's already being done by one of our other advisory teams? And it sounds like you feel like the work that you're doing is meaningful, and that as you just said, your voice has been heard, and so that, you know, this is valuable work that you're doing. And so I guess as far as I'm concerned, it seems like it's a success. So
we can stop now?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I'd say keep up the good work. So was there anything else, anybody? Or from you? No? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sending them home now.
Oh, and since the teachers are here, so my 2 kids were arguing in the car today. Is there 11 days of school left or 12? Because Madeline said it's not nighttime yet, so it's still.
As I said, Rick, you really should stay out of that one and let them work that one out.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to the next agenda item, bid award for roof replacement at Valley View Middle School.
Mr. Chair?
We gotta get to work.
Yes.
Resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 271 accepts the Thomas Finn Company, St. Paul, Minnesota bid of $378,500 to re-roof Valley View Middle School and approve the contract to accomplish this work.
Okay, and we have Tim Reebok. Yes? Come on forward. will be presenting this one for us. Thanks for being here.
Good evening.
You're filling in for Rod this evening, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So it is our recommendation that we approve bids for the Valley View Middle School re-roof project and award the contract to Thomas Finn Company.
Is there any questions?
This is just over summer work?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor of accepting this bid award, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes. The next one up is rejection of bids received for secondary improvements.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
be it resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 271 rejects bids received for the secondary improvements.
I'll ask Mr. Reebok, what can you tell us about this one?
In putting our projects together, we put together a budget, and in our bid letting, our budget was exceeded, so we're suggesting that we reject these bids. We're going to be working through the board-approved process to come back together and start working on the projects in a quote basis to get as much of the work as we possibly can get done this summer. But this set of bids, it's our recommendation to reject.
Mr. Chair, just so I'm understanding, they all came in too high?
As a package, yes.
Okay, so it doesn't reflect on the company that's placing the bid, it's just that they've exceeded parameters, and
Correct.
we want to try and retool that?
Correct.
Okay.
So is this going to alter the timeline of any of these construction projects, or how is that going to work out?
It does have the ability to affect some of the timeline. We're going to work real hard to put the pieces in place to make sure that the students have the experience going into next fall that we had put out on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All those in favor of this resolution, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that one passes, and that brings us now to rejection of bids received for Kennedy High School cafeteria mechanical improvements.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 271 rejects bids received for cafeteria mechanical improvements at Kennedy High School.
Second.
Mr. Reebok? I'm guessing it's the same type of thing that came in too high?
That is correct.
Okay.
Sure. When they come in too high, you know, and there's certain specifications that they have to meet, all the bidders have to follow the same criteria and specifications. Do any of them alter it or say, hey, we can do it this way, da-da-da-da-da?
We would have that discussion led by our architectural firm and a construction management firm. It's commonly referred to as value engineering. We're taking a look at the projects to see what drove the costs up first, and then secondly, to see if those pieces that drove the cost up are something that we can take a look at and still achieve the goal of what the project was intended to bring.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? All those in favor of this resolution, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that one passes. And I believe then that brings us, okay, I believe we're finished. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Rubin.
you.
Next on the agenda is K-12 Social Studies Prioritized Standards.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves their prioritized social studies standards for grades K-12 effective with the 2017-2018 school year.
Second?
Okay, and we have a team of people. What can you tell us about this one?
Chair Oliva, Superintendent Fujitaki, members of the board, thanks for the opportunity to share this information with you tonight. I've got Yes, a team here who will be doing most of the discussing of the standards work, and so I'm going to pass the baton to Rachel Jens and have her introduce the rest of the team and kind of take it from there.
Good evening, Chair Leva, Superintendent Fujitaki, members of the board. As you know, our curriculum and instruction specialists have been working this year to review standards in several academic areas. And so tonight we'd like to update you on our work in K-12 social studies and also seek your approval for some changes to our K-12 prioritized standards. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those changes. With me tonight, I do have some colleagues. To my right is Deb Kaiser. Deb is a 5th grade teacher at Westwood Elementary and has been an active member on our K-5 social studies team. Marcy Koval, who's our curriculum and instruction specialist leading our secondary team, and Jenna Mitchler, who's our lead secondary curriculum and instruction specialist. We really strive to have diverse and wide representation on our teams. And so you can see at the elementary level, we have classroom teachers from 7 of our elementary schools. We also have representation from our EL department, our special education department, and the Office of Educational Equity. We were also fortunate in this round to have a parent member on our committee. Katie Staub, who represents our Pathways Advisory Committee, was able to join us for several of our meetings.
And the 612 committee membership mirrors that of what you saw in elementary as well.
So as you know, we have a foundational curriculum review cycle in place that is articulated in a series of 5 phases. And this cycle really mirrors and parallels the standards review release timeline that we get from the Minnesota Department of Education. It also allows us for opportunities for continuous improvement along the way. And that's what we're really focused on with our social studies review. So social studies standards were last reviewed by the state in 2011, and our curriculum and instruction department did an initial curriculum review at this time. And so we're in phase 4. We are doing a mid-cycle review to look at the implementation data and feedback and make any necessary changes going forward to make sure that our curriculum stays guaranteed and viable for our students. At the elementary level, we do have a K-5 social studies mission statement in place. The team did not recommend any changes to that mission statement. They really felt that that still represented what we were seeking to do at the elementary level with our students.
As well, the 612 team also didn't make any changes. They were happy with the mission statement that they created in year 1 of the review cycle. We did talk about and take into consideration as we looked at the review cycle, best practice in social studies education. So to make sure that what's happening in the classroom is based around inquiry, concept-based instruction, and integration of the content in other areas as well. And this review goes through what we've done in the previous review cycles when we take a look at the standards and we prioritize them based on the state benchmarks and taking a look at whether they're essential, important, or enhancing. We met together as a team, both the elementary and then as secondary team, to come to an agreement as far as where those benchmarks fall within those 3 categories. And we determine an essential standard by looking at them and considering their readiness. So does it prepare students for the next level of learning? In social studies, there isn't a standardized test that students take, but there are skills involved in social studies education that help prepare students for those tests. So we certainly consider those skills within those benchmarks. Endurance as well. So is it something that the student will last through their lifetime? Is it a value that they'll carry with them? As well as leverage. Does it help them in other areas within their education? So an essential standard would have all 4 of those characteristics. And so if it does, then it's often determined an essential standard or benchmark. And that's something that is assessed commonly throughout our district. An important standard may not necessarily fall within all of those lenses, but also it is important, it is taught, and it supports those essential standards. And as well as enhancing standards. They may not be central to the course, they are covered, but it's more of a preview or maybe not as taught as in depth as some of the other standards.
Yes, I would like to highlight, I mentioned that we are recommending some changes to the previous prioritization, and so I'll talk a little bit about what those changes are and let Deb chime in with some of those details as well. So at the elementary level, the courses for K through 3 are all Foundations of Social Studies courses, which means that all 4 strands of social studies, citizenship and government, economics, geography, and history, all have approximate equal treatment. There isn't one discipline that's emphasized over another at those grade levels. Once we get to grade 4, the focus area is geography, particularly the geography of North America, and then in grade 5, we have a focus on the history of North America up to 1800. As we were looking at the prioritized standards, one of the areas that really stuck out to us, particularly at that K3 level, was the area of economics. Many of the grade levels had no essential standards in economics, and we wanted to see some changes in that area, particularly around skills like economic reasoning and personal finance. Thinking about that endurance criteria, we felt it was really important for students, even at an early age, to start understanding the difference between needs and wants, and the costs and benefits of saving versus spending versus donating. And so we did include at least one essential standard in economics at each grade level. So that's one of the changes that I would highlight for you. Another area that we wanted to put more emphasis on, K5, were civic participation skills and civic value skills. So really making sure that students have instruction from kindergarten all the way to 5th grade on how to participate in conversations, recognizing that people are going to have diverse opinions, how to disagree with someone in a respectful way, and how to value differences in cultures of students that are in class with you. And so you'll see in the prioritized standards, again, more emphasis, more standards within those citizenship and government strands being emphasized. There's also some changes at the 5th grade level, and as a 5th grade teacher, I'll let Deb talk a little bit about those.
Well, one of the things that we talked about was trying to integrate a lot of the topics that we learn in social studies into some other areas. We had a lot of essential standards in specific historical events, in trying to broaden that out so that there was a more broad perspective of what was essential, and then maybe those historical events were either important or enhancing, and trying to really balance the numbers from grade 1 all the way through grade 5 so that it is a doable amount of content that you really try to emphasize and focus on.
In the secondary courses, you can see the list of these are the required courses that students take. And they kept their essential standards that they had previously prioritized. They did add a few more concepts within those essential standards. So some more content-heavy essential standards per trimester. But overall, the essential standards that they had before, they kept those. The social studies teachers will meet next year as well to talk about common summative assessments and proficiency scales that will align to the standards that we prioritize this year.
So we have shared those prioritized standards with you for your review. We also wanted to note that we've received some feedback and recommendations from the Pathways Advisory Committee, the District Diversity and Equity Advisory Committee, and Building Principals. And some of the changes that we did make were a result of the feedback that we got from those groups. So I would invite any feedback or questions that you have at this time.
Dr. Bergstrom?
Chair? Well, first of all, thank you for coming. Manners first, right? I appreciate the energy, the effort that you guys put into this. I love these presentations. I hope I'm not speaking out of line if I read one of the important standards for 7th grade social studies. Is that okay? Okay. Just for the huge television audience tonight, there's one here that says, identify examples of how principles expressed in the Declaration of Independence, in the preamble to the Constitution, have been applied throughout the United States history, including how they have evolved, if applicable, over time. So this is what we're looking at in 7th grade?
Grade is U.S. history, and so that's an essential part of the learning in 7th grade.
Well, I just picked one at random.
Yeah.
I just put my pencil down, but this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work to organize it. It's a lot of work to figure out, does it fit, does it not fit? And then it's a lot of work in the classroom for the teachers to teach it. So I appreciate the work along the way. There's a lot of work that happens before this stuff even gets in here. So I just wanted to highlight that one item. My packet is full of goodies, and I could keep you here all night, but I know you got to get going. So I appreciate you staying for this portion of the agenda.
Dr. Storm?
Yeah, I have a kind of an important question. The students left before they had a chance to review any of these things. And that's unfortunate, and Ally doesn't need to anymore because she's graduating, but
Maybe.
Ethan certainly will. How standard are the standards that we're using here, our standards now? You know, granted that there's some national standards, state standards, and so forth like that. So does each district kind of do their own? And I'm sure Marcy's been on the phone all over the districts in order to figure out, you know, 'cause these are significant, and some of us wouldn't be able to do the 7th grade answers for any of these standards. But I guess the question is, we go through this cycle every 7 years or whatever it is, 5 years now or 7, you know, in order to come up with them. And there's a lot happening in between those years, so that when we come together again and do this, you know, we might revise these again, condense or expand or whatever. Yeah, is that, you know, so typical, or are we ahead of the game?
Yeah, so we've really worked hard to make sure that our review cycle is aligned to the state. So the state reviews and revises academic standards every 10 years. And so that's why we have this 10-year cycle with kind of that 5-year check-in, knowing that 10 years is a long time to go. Lots of things could happen. To answer your question about whether these are local standards or state standards, all districts in Minnesota are required to implement the Minnesota state academic standards in social studies. And so that's what you're seeing. What we get to make some decisions about is which of those standards we prioritize over others. We teach all of the standards, but we're making the decisions about what content or what skills to emphasize over others.
And that's where the big committee comes in and helps make that decisions and priorities. Did you ever consider having students involved?
Yeah, we did have a group, and Marcy, I think you were involved in meeting with.
We did
that
meet
team.
Twice with, well, we met with the middle school Bloomington Student Advisory Council, and we also met with the high school Bloomington Advisory Council. And we actually, that was a topic of our discussion and a few of our team meetings as far as trying to bring in more student voice throughout this process.
So Ethan, that's an agenda item for your September meeting. Now that Ally won't be here to do it for you, you'll have to be thinking ahead. Sure.
So I was kind of going to ask a question that Jim asked. I was kind of wanting to know, the state sends out the standards, but they don't discriminate them at all. They don't prioritize them. It's for each district to determine. So I'm wondering, what does that process look like of you guys going through these and determining, well, what's essential, what's important? Because I look at some of these and I'm like, well, how come that one's not essential? Why is that one essential and not important?
Yeah.
So could you just give us a glimpse of like what that process actually looks like?
Yep, so the 4 criteria that you heard earlier, so the readiness, endurance, whether it's assessed on some sort of state assessment, which there isn't one in social studies, and then that leverage criteria, does it apply across disciplines? What we do is literally go standard by standard, and we write next to each one, does this have readiness? Is this going to help students with content that's coming later in a course? Is this standard prerequisite knowledge to a future standard? And then same thing with endurance. Is this going to represent college and career readiness, those lifelong skills of what they're going to have to know and be able to do as an adult? Same thing with the assessments and then the leverage. And standards in which we've got at least 3, if not all 4 criteria next to them, those are automatically essential standards. And then depending on kind of the magnitude, how many we've identified through that process, then we'll kind of go through another filter and look at any additional that we would want to add to that.
Okay, so throughout the course of the year, how many times did you guys meet? Like about how many hours did you guys spend on doing this? Do you have that in your mind?
Yeah, we met 4 times. So our 4th meeting actually at elementary is this Wednesday. So we've met 3
Okay.
times for full days, 7-hour days. Plus there's some work that happens between meetings as well to prepare for those. So.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure the teachers appreciate having these prioritized standards, so they don't just look at them and be so overwhelmed with, I got to do all 30 of these standards and don't know where to begin. So it's very helpful for our teachers.
Yeah, and then that brings up a good point. Who helps them with their lesson plans?
That's our next step in looking at materials this next year, is to make sure that we have materials that do align to all of those standards. And we want to make sure that students have differentiation in that, right? So that we don't have to use the exact same materials for them to reach the standard, that we can use different materials that might capture their interest or meet their learning style. But we want to hold them all accountable for mastering the same set of standards.
And flexibility in each of the schools of some kind, I suppose, between the teachers' emphasis and/or the department, their school department, or whatever it is, or team teachers, come together and say, let's try this and work on that, and that could change every year.
And I think that's a big part of what we're doing right now, is looking at what worked in the first 4 years and what needs updating. And where do we go for that? And how do we integrate it into reading language arts if possible?
Yeah.
Some of the learning materials, like about a historical figure or an event, or their writing, they could maybe write about the American Revolution and use that learning, even though it's social studies learning.
We always try to also balance the need for consistency across sites with also recognizing that we want our teachers to be creative and innovative in the approaches that they take. So.
What do you think of all this, Eric?
I think it's great. I think you guys have pointed out as board members the time and effort that goes into it, and you saw the lists of people, and when you've heard me come up here and talk about the fact that we can't intervene our way out of achievement gaps, I think when you have a talented group of folks working on these things, that's what's going to improve our core instruction for all of our students. And I know that these folks at the table work hard on that. We've got others who aren't at the table who worked hard on that. It's exciting to see the active participation of folks from our Office of Educational Equity and our English Learner Department and others that are part of these teams. It's exciting to see the parent representation at the table, which I don't know that we've always had in the past. Is Katie? Yep, there she is. Serving on the teams, as others from PAC have helped out on these teams. It's really exciting. I think it's great work, and I'm really, is it okay to say, proud of the team? I think it's great. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, I've served on one of those several years ago, and it's great work. And just for people who are listening and don't know exactly what we're talking about, like, for example, identify possible short and long-term consequences of different choices. That's an essential standard. That's one seems like it makes sense that would be essential. Where compare and contrast daily life for people living in ancient times in at least 3 different regions of the world, post-classical medieval civilizations and expanding zones of exchange, 600 CE to 1450 CE. It's like, that's cool stuff to know, but like, I need to know now short and long-term consequences of different choices, where the other stuff might make me, I don't know, more interesting, but.
And that's in 4th grade.
And that's 3rd grade, social studies. So, so thanks for the work that you do and getting these all lined up. And I think, as you mentioned, the key now is the next step of implementation and selecting curriculum for it. So, any other questions? Eric challenged me to be done with the meeting by 8:30, and we're done with this your part by, you have 15 seconds to spare. All right, all those in favor of this resolution, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're good, thank you. Next up, 7 to 12, World Language Prioritized Standards Approval.
Mr. Chair, resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves the prioritized world language standards for grades 7-12 effective with the 2017-2018 school year.
Second?
New team.
A new team. So again, Chair Oliva, Superintendent Fujitaki, members of the board, to talk about the world language work. I'm going to pass the baton to Dr. Jenna Mitchler, and she'll introduce the rest of the team and take you through the slides.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, everyone, for having us tonight. So Rachel mentioned that this working through a curriculum review process is some work in between meetings and that the meetings are very intensive. I think she was being modest, and really, I can say, because I see it happen all the time, that the work that goes in between meetings is quite intensive. And so Jane Lascarbo, as well as Marcy Koval, everyone who's working on our curriculum review team has been putting in a lot of time and doing some really great work. So I'm just really happy, first of all, to be a part of this team. So Jane is here tonight with some other folks from the World Language Curriculum Review team to introduce the standards for you and seek approval for them here tonight. So she has Kate Brookmeyer, who is a Spanish teacher at Jefferson High School, and David Johnson, who is a Latin teacher at Jefferson High School. And I'll let you go ahead and present. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenna. All right, so Kate and David and I are here presenting the world language standards for you tonight for approval. Part of the members of our team, again, like Rachel had mentioned with social studies, we seek a diverse perspective on the curriculum review team. So having middle school and high school representation from the world languages that are offered in Bloomington Public Schools represent on this team, as well as English language learners, Office of Education Equity, the Pathways Advisory Council membership as well. We've received feedback on the prioritized standards from the Pathways Advisory Council, from the District Diversity Equity Advisory Committee, and secondary principals. In the secondary sites, we have Spanish and French offered at grades 7 and 8 in the middle schools, level 1. In the high schools, we have Latin, Spanish, French, and Japanese offered levels 1 through 4 for Latin. Spanish and French, it's levels 1 through 5, and advanced placement, and Japanese is levels 1 through 4. When we begin our work with standards, we look at work as the work of equity. So when we prioritize the standards, we look at the standards as these are the things that we want all Bloomington students to know and be able to do. And so when we look at the benchmarks that we have of the standards, the expectation is that the students will meet proficiency by the end of the course. And so that proficiency course in expectation seems pretty linear with a straight trajectory. However, inside the classrooms, that isn't how it always works out. Our reality is a little bit wiggly along the way when we look at getting students to proficiency of the standards at each of the levels. And so the teachers do the work of the formative and summative assessments along the way. And we curate the materials to align to the prioritized standards that represent Bloomington Public Schools students. Rachel had mentioned in the social studies about the foundational curriculum review. We are in phase 1 of the curriculum review. And the initial curriculum review phase considers best practice in instruction for world language. It then looks at the national frameworks where we get the standards and we prioritize them and then unpack them. And then once those standards are prioritized, we curate materials that align with those standards. Bloomington, by prioritizing standards, guarantees a viable curriculum for all students. And so the team's goals were to reach consensus on a manageable number of essential, important, and enhancing standards, and how we prioritize those. To also look at, because we have language levels 1 through 5, we looked at creating vertical alignment along the way of each of those levels, and then to curate the materials that align to those prioritized standards.
Well, Minnesota does not have state standards for world language, so we adopt the ACTFL national standards, which involve the 5 C's, as they're known, of communities, communication, cultures, comparisons, and connections.
So when we look at the essential standards, we look at through those 4 lenses, and world language not having a standardized test, it has assessments for along each of the levels to be proficient in those assessments. But we look at endurance, we look at leverage, and we look at does it prepare for the next level of learning. And then the important standards are support standards for the essential standards, and they don't quite rise to the level of essential, but are supportive of getting to proficiency of the essential standards. And then the enhancing can be preview standards or review standards, because learning is that cycle of review. And so looking at the enhancing as, again, supporting standards.
This is our vision statement, which we modified slightly, I believe, from what we had previously, just trying to get at the connection and the marriage between the language and the culture, and how you're not just learning a language, you are learning about people and cultures.
I think you have the standards that we have for each language and level in front of you, so I don't know if you have any questions or.
I'll go ahead and ask a question. First of all, thank you for coming. Thanks for staying. We can be kind of long-winded, and I apologize. I know you got stuff to do at 8:37 on a Monday night, but, so I'm looking at, I'm going to do the same thing I did for our last presentation. This is World Language Latin Standards Level 4 Advanced. And I'm going to look at the first thing under important standards. It says demonstrate a broad knowledge of Roman history, customs, and private and political life gained from their reading of Latin authors, and use that knowledge in analyzing Roman culture. That is a mouthful. That's a lot. And how do you get to Level 4 Advanced? How do you get to this particular one being an important standard?
So this is, so it's a little bit beyond sort of the bare bones, just you're taking a next step, basically, from the language to the culture. And so at Level 4 Advanced, we're reading authentic literature that was written thousands of years ago, and so it's the thing I like about Latin is that it's as much historical as it is anything else, and so you're really sort of using the language, using what was written by these ancient peoples to get a view of their culture, and so it's not something that is totally essential in that I wouldn't want to withhold credit if they weren't able to do this to the proper level, but it is a very important and a very rewarding aspect. So
I'm sure all your students are watching now. They're going to hold you to that. So. Well, I just, the reason I picked on that one is it's the first one under important standards. They all appear to be important, at least from my layperson's point of view. I appreciate the energy and the effort that goes into this. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work rolling it out, figuring out what is and what isn't. You could fill up 10 class periods with stuff that you think is important, and I'm sure I'm underestimating the number of class periods. I'm sure you have a long list of books that you would recommend to your students to read. But I appreciate the energy and the effort that goes into this.
Would the state ever get involved in this standards in world languages? Has the state offered recommendations? And how would we deal with that? As you've done with the American Council on Teaching Foreign Languages. I mean, obviously, other districts or states or whatever it is chooses different ones. What influence is the state doing on us to come up with their standards?
Minnesota doesn't have state standards for world language. However, MDE does endorse the ACTFL standards, which is a national framework. And so most districts around as we began the research of this, use the ACTFL standards and prioritize those standards for their world language courses, as well as other national frameworks like Latin comes from a classical, which follows
the
a little.
American Classical League, which is based off the ACTFL, but it's slightly different because we're in a slightly different situation with being a historical language.
Thank you.
So is it ACTFL, is that how it's pronounced?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have standards for K through 6, or they just do 7 through 12?
The ACTFL standards are the standards, I believe, Jenny, you could maybe answer this, are I believe, K-12
Okay.
national framework.
So we don't have any type of exposure to world languages at all with our students from kindergarten through 6th grade, is that correct?
Not at this time.
I'm looking at your vision statement, and it says, to teach our students to communicate in a language other than English. So to meet that vision statement, is it doable to wait until 7th grade before we expose our students to any foreign language, or should we be trying to do that exposure earlier?
Ideally, it would be wonderful to have the opportunity for them to learn earlier.
Okay. So when you had any of any recommendations from like the Pathway Advisory Council or anything, was there any discussion about, were any recommendations or anything about elementary exposure to world languages, or?
Well, I feel that's a different, I was on a committee about 5 years ago, actually, that explored an option of like a dual immersion school. And nothing, I don't know whatever happened to it. Nothing ever became of it. I think that's under a different umbrella from what we're doing in this process right here.
All right. I was just wondering if it's sufficient enough to meet your guys' vision of teaching students to communicate in a language not their foreign or not their native language, if waiting till 7th grade if we're sufficiently meeting that vision.
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, but I think most of us in this room, that's sort of our experience, that it did not that traditionally it sort of started around middle school, and you got to where you are.
I started in 9th grade,
Okay. All right, thank you. Sorry to ask such difficult questions. Is this a world
No, it
language
is
something I would
something-
like to really see from K through 12 in
No,
our
it is,
district?
yeah, it is,
So-
and it's definitely a wonderful opportunity, and like I said, I was on a committee 5 years ago, and it just kind of, I don't know what happened, but it didn't go forward, I guess, so.
Well, yeah, that was unfortunate. That was before I was here, but, so you can't believe it.
The Pathways Advisory Council did bring up and had some feedback and questions about that, and that is how we responded as well. And that's something we could, perhaps investigate.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Director Corman?
Yeah. Well, you got me right at my field because I'm a Spanish teacher. So I could stay here for a long time. But let's start with my first question, and it is, as a Spanish teacher, I know that what we teach is not really considered to be the most valued class, right? Any type of language class is very disregarded by school districts, many school districts, students, and sometimes even parents. Why do I need to learn another language? who cares? I'm never gonna travel outside of the States. Or, you know, this is just a requirement, I'm just gonna do it, but not necessarily put all my effort into this class. So I know that there are some of the school districts that we have in the metro area that have very strong language department, right? And I know that for other school districts, there's still struggles, you know, within the same department for all languages, all different languages. I want to ask you, what are the kind of the challenges that we're facing in Bloomington right now specifically? What are the struggles, the challenges that we have in our language department?
I think sometimes scheduling maybe can be one. Students have a lot of requirements that they have to fulfill, especially in 9th and 10th grade. And so sometimes, let's say they're in music, especially it's hard for them to be able to take a language and music as a 9th or 10th grader especially. So they have to maybe do the early bird classes or make some other arrangements. So I would say it's a big concern.
Yeah.
And
I liked seeing the students' recommendations that there are more early bird options. I think that's a really sort of constricting thing, is that there's very few early bird options right now, just because of the way the numbers work out and sort of the struggles of scheduling that. And so I think that does feed into, it's hard to take a language for all 4 years of your high school career.
Mm-hmm. And it may be also, especially in the lower levels, sometimes class sizes, because in order to run a class, you know, you have to have like 31 students. And so sometimes in the lower levels, you can get level 2 class I have one class of 34 students. And as they were talking about before, I have one class of 34 and then I have one class of 23. So what I can do with each of those classes is different, and so it really affects how the activities you choose and the things that you do within a class when you have a big disparity like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and going into your, I think it's your 5th slide, where it says secondary world language courses. I can see that, if you can please go back there. So we have Latin, Spanish, French, Japanese, and we have levels 1 to 4. And I noticed that for Spanish and French, you have advanced placement, AP Spanish. Now, we do not offer the class, is that right? We do not offer the class, the course, but we do offer the test. Is that correct? Or do we have an AP class in each one of the?
we have an AP Spanish class.
There is one at Jefferson. Mm-hmm. Okay, but the AP test is offered in both schools, right? Both of the high schools.
Yes, both high schools offer the AP exam.
Okay, so we have one school that's offering the AP class and the students take the test, and the other high school, the students take the test without preparation.
They take level 5. So at Kennedy, level 5 in Spanish and French is offered, and AP Spanish currently this year is offered at Jefferson, and AP will be offered in French next year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 2 main reasons right now why we don't have the AP class at Kennedy High School. So the first one would be that the teachers receive special training and have to have certain credentials in order to teach that course. And so right now at Kennedy, we don't have a teacher with those credentials and that training. And then also because of just course numbers, as we were mentioning before, they had tried to run, I believe from what I was hearing from one of the teachers in one of the review days recently, that they had tried to run an AP class several years ago when they had a credentialed teacher and they didn't have the numbers to run the course. So those would be the 2 logistical reasons why they don't have the AP course at Kennedy High School. But as Jane mentioned, they do have the level 5, which teaches many of the same skills, which does prepare students for the opportunity to take the AP exam.
Right, but this is not the AP Spanish Language and Culture class.
That's right.
Is that right? It's a different level. Right. It's a different curriculum. Okay, so when you talk about credentials, what credentials are you talking about for the AP?
For the AP, they have to take, it's recommended that they take some training on advanced placement, and then the materials and the syllabus need to be approved by the College Board.
Mm-hmm. Is that something we can possibly provide to our teachers? I
Yes,
mean, like send our teachers to have the proper training so that we don't have to wait for a candidate to apply for a teaching position that has already that credential?
Yes, and that is why we have the ability to offer the advanced placement for French. Next year, a teacher that teaches French is getting her certification or her credentials for that, and then offering it next year at Jefferson.
Okay, very good. So I don't have any more questions for you, but I do have a comment for the board, because we were talking about this during our PAC meeting. And talking about the importance of teaching a language, another language, right? And how it kind of comes together with culture. And when we look into our students, some of our students, especially our native speakers, if we're teaching that Spanish class, I don't think we have too many French students, but we do have a lot of students that have as native language Spanish. They do have the option of being in levels 1 to 4. However, what is being noticed is that our native speakers, that if they try to go into the level 4, that's kind of like the highest, but it would not be enough for them. Like they could actually benefit from a higher level of Spanish. So if we could have the possibility at some time in the school district to offer classes that are more advanced for language, that would be very beneficial for our students. Also, we talked about maybe even including some sort of a heritage class, right, which is only for native speakers, where speakers could actually feel really comfortable, within their own culture and language, just developing all the skills that are necessary for those classes. So because we know that language comes along with culture, its identity, and when you are in a class like this and you can get your language skills kind of more proficient, then that also helps your brain with your second language, especially if you are an English language learner. So I think that's something that it will be important for us to consider and for you to continue to have conversations. What other possibilities, what other things can we offer to our students, especially those who are already immersing the language at home. Speaking a language doesn't necessarily mean that we know how to read it and write it well, comprehend it, right? So I think our students would really benefit from that kind of curriculum where they can actually get better at their own language, at their native language, because we're having kids who are not completely proficient in English, and then they're not completely proficient in Spanish either. So neither one of both languages are really strong. And so I think that's important. Another piece that's really important, and I'm glad that you brought the attention to that, Mr. Bennett, is that the age when we offer those classes, those language classes, the exposure that our students get to a second language, the ideal would be at an early age. Whether it is a class that they can take, every day or every other day, it started at the elementary school, or if it's the immersion program. I think that was something that was brought years ago, but at that moment the district didn't think or didn't consider that was needed at that time, or that it was possible to offer at that time. But I think it's good that we continue to consider that possibility now too, since that attracts a lot of families, since a lot of school districts already have those immersion programs. And we do see a lot of our families even moving to other school districts just because of that certain preference. If we look around all the other school districts around us, all of our neighbors have some sort of an immersion program. So I truly believe that we're missing on bringing more people to us, retaining families, keeping our families here, and maybe even making it more attractive to others, like some other school districts that have strong language departments. So, yeah.
So we're in phase 1, and so there's a lot of stuff to be done, as we go along. Some of the questions that Nellie brings up, we're obviously going to consider, and as you review and go through all of these types of things, the nature of the students as they evolve in the next 3 years this is a 5-year plan. So as it evolves and we see the diversity of the students and all of these types of things enter into the question. So some of these questions might easily come up, and we look forward to some more discussion.
Thank you.
So maybe what you can do is you can work with the social studies group that was just here, and as you're talking about social studies in ancient Rome, you can talk about, what do the Romans speak, Latin?
Yeah, yeah.
You can talk about Latin, and
I
when-
do work with the social studies quite a bit. I am able to go more in depth, whereas the social studies have 1 day, 2 days on ancient Rome. I get years.
This is a great conversation. Thank you for the work that you did. I know it's tough getting into elementary school, starting at that early, because then it's, well, what language are we going to pick? I know that my kids, I think some teachers will just do it anyways, because I know my kids could count to 10 in Spanish. I think my daughter she'd get to once, she'd get to 11, and then she's like, once, dos, 3C, 4C. She didn't quite know what came after that. But yeah, so this is great conversation, things to consider. Any other questions? No? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so that was 712 language. Next technologies for learning. And this is just an update. I don't believe there's a
Report,
resolution on this.
yeah.
Just a report.
One short hour, that's all we ask.
We only got an hour and a half left before we have to adjourn, so.
I see Dr. Heisted,
Been plenty of time.
Dr. Heisted already left, so
While Katrina loads the slideshow, I'll start. Thank you, Chair Oliva, Superintendent of Fujitaki, board members. We're here tonight, Katrina Mesra, Digital Learning and Data Manager, and I are here tonight to give you our annual update on next technologies for learning. We're going to do two things. We're going to look at this year's work, what we're measuring, and really more like 3 years' work. That'll become obvious as we talk here in a minute. What we're measuring, what we're doing at each site collaboratively, and then part two will be what we're most excited about looking forward. This is a pretty big change for our school system, Next Tech for Learning is, and so we'll be hitting the high points. NTL started in 2013 with the referendum, the 2013 Safe and Innovative Schools referendum. Oh, here, thank you. And it's in great alignment with the Pathways to Graduation effort, which is, if Pathways to Graduation is an effort to create a personalization of what we do for each student in our system, online learning and NTL is the facilitation or the implementation of that. We often talk about personalization in the tech world, the ability for tech to help personalize learning for students. Personalization is really creating 3,000 pathways for 3,000 students in our system. Just as a reminder, NTL has 3 components: digital content, anytime, anywhere learning, which stretches the time and place where students learn, and then personalized data, which is getting the right information to the right people so that they can make good educational decisions. Students, parents, and staff, getting them the right data to make good decisions. Every site has had a year 1 implementation since 2013. We're in a 3-year cycle, and so in 14-15, middle schools were in their year 1 implementation, and we came and talked to you and reported on that. In 15-16, it was the high schools and our community ed campus that was in that year 1 transition. This year, it has been our elementaries and early childhood programs that have been in that year 1 transition. It's not small work for these sites. So if you were at an elementary school this year, you experienced students getting devices one-to-one in a 3rd grade classroom, for instance, Chromebooks. You experienced digital content days in partnership with our learning and teaching friends around ELA standards.
and you experienced a change to your instruction, like what are you doing now that you have this level of access that we've never had before? We don't have to take our students down to the computer lab. How does that change your instruction? In some ways, what we're talking about here and what we're trying to represent in those two graphs on the left is we've gone through that year one implementation at every site in Bloomington. We're now going into a phase two, which is about what do we build on top of that foundation. And so Katrina's going to talk a little bit about this year, and then I'm going to talk about that anytime, anywhere highlights, which is flexible learning, flexible spaces, and online learning, which you heard mentioned earlier.
So a little bit about the foundation that we built over the last 3 years. So the first thing is that John was just mentioning, the device rollout is complete. So that means that at grades 3 through 12, we're 1-to-1 with devices. At grades pre-K through 2, we're at least at a 1-to-3. Several buildings have found ways to increase that ratio a little bit. And then in addition, we're at carts and labs in both Choice and at Metro South. That foundation then allows us to do some other things. Once you have access to the digital content through those devices, it means that kids can use digital content, and teachers can elect to ask kids to use that digital content. And so our students report in a January survey that about 75.5% of them in grades 3 through 12 have used digital content in 3 or more courses per day on average. So what that tells us is that it's not 100% of the time, it's not 100% of courses, but that teachers are using it strategically and as it makes sense, which is excellent to hear. So what exactly are our students doing? Again, per their report, we see that there's a lot of accessing content. So things like researching, doing some inquiry, with the rich resources of the internet, and taking quizzes or looking at videos to learn new content is very common. A little less common, but still a frequent experience for our students is communication. So chatting, emailing, collaborating with other students, and occasionally outside. You know, you hear the great story about tweeting authors or Skyping with authors or working with professors at the University of Minnesota. So more and more collaborating with all of our experts outside of our own school community, which is exciting. And then finally, creation. So, our students get to do a lot of presentations. That's fairly commonplace, which is good because you've heard a lot of them tonight, so we know what might be in their future to do that. But also looking at photos and making websites. And one of the big growth areas this year has been coding, which is really exciting. So we know that's sort of a future-looking skill, and so especially at our elementary level, kids are doing a lot of coding, which is pretty exciting. I have a third grader who's very into it. So given that, if we pivot a little bit to anytime, anywhere, so if you take that school experience, and now we know that these devices are going home as well. And so that allows some other things outside of the classroom and outside of the school day. And so that anytime, anywhere learning, we're seeing significant growth over the last 3 years. Looking at doing those same types of activities we were just talking about outside of the school day as well. One of the charges you gave to us in 2013 when we launched NTL as a school board, you said, pay attention to internet access, because if you're going down this path, it's very important that we don't disadvantage kids without internet access. If you move the whole curriculum to a digital format and deny access to a certain percent of our population, that's obviously not serving all of our students well. And so we've taken that charge and seen a reduction from 2013 from 5% of our students who didn't have reliable access to the internet. In 2017, that metric is at 2.8% of our students who still need help with that. And we, through NTL, have capacity to meet 3% of the need through hotspots that are available through the Media Center. And so largely we have one available as students need it, and so have that resource. And so generally students report that they have internet when they need it. And then turning to personalized data, we look at our personalized data system as the hub, so the place where parents, students, and staff can all log in to get information to make academic decisions. We continue to see great growth over time. We still see people taking Saturdays off, as you can see on our graph there. That's the dip, which is great too. Breaks are great. So that continues to be a relevant tool. in large part, I attribute that to active engagement by our teachers. They're feeding it good information, and so we see the number of teacher news feeds up, and we see the number of teacher calendars up, which means when our teachers are engaged. On the flip side of that, we see that more parents are engaging either by logging in or opting to stick with getting that email digest on a daily basis.
So like I said, each of our schools have gone through that year one transition. This year it's the elementary that have gone through that cycle. We're pretty proud of those graphs as we see that data improve each year as staff and students and parents are more and more engaged. Looking forward, we're adding from Next Technologies for Learning, we're adding this, a twist, Next Technologies for Personalized Learning. What are we going to build on that foundation? Some of this is familiar to you, and back in December, Holly Skadsum and Karen Qualley and I were here talking about flexible instruction, and this slide was there. This is an updated version. The journey over the last few years has been a cohort of teachers, 70 teachers in 15-16, who wanted to stretch what they do in the classroom to be more flexible. 16-17, that number grew. This year grew to 105 teachers, and for 17-18, we're building for a capacity of 140 teachers. Those are teachers who are signing up, wanting to step in and stretch a little bit, so we love that. Changing instruction requires a new look at facilities and a new look at spaces, so hopefully you remember that Mr. Anderson and Mr. Beaton and I were here a couple months ago, and we talked about some of those changes at Jefferson and Kennedy that are coming this summer to accommodate the prior work, but also to build toward future work. In that presentation, we also talked about the partnership with EFB, Education Foundation of Bloomington, in their Phase 1 grants to do some work inside of classrooms at as many sites as possible. That Phase 2 grant process is going on right now. And Karen Arazi from the EFB is leading Les and I and a number of other people on a tour of those Round 1 grant recipients tomorrow, so that'll be pretty exciting. Not to leave out the elementary schools, Poplar Bridge is also, as part of their construction, is getting an overall to their media center space, their that Learning Commons transition we've talked about, as well as some interesting work across 3 fifth grade classrooms where the walls are opening up and looking at that 5th grade as a continuum. So earlier you heard in the advisory update about online learning. This is one of the things that I'm most excited about for next year's work. This has been a discussion point for many years. Our parents and our students have expressed interest. They've expressed interest by talking about it. They've expressed interest by having schedule conflicts, and they've expressed interest by taking online courses outside of our system. This was the year we got our arms around that. We needed some help to do it, so we got the help of Catherine Haddad, a Kennedy High School language arts teacher. Catherine came over a couple months ago, and she helped us concentrate on what would we do to create our own BPS online courses. So here's a little bit about that. What we aspire to do is create options for Bloomington Public School students. Those options are important because students and families are expressing they need them. They need those options. You heard a little bit, I would reflect back on the world language report you just heard, that when I was working at Jefferson with Kate and with Dave, one of the problems always is when you schedule, if you're an active student and if you schedule in your music and your important subjects, you often find places where your schedule doesn't work very well. Every course that we can take into a more flexible format allows for more options, and so this, I think, will help in that general direction.
Can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
There's the interactive aspect, and a few years back, we used to have some Japanese or some world languages that were done at each school, so that the class size was 6 at one, 12 at another. That obviously is a potential with this.
Yeah, exactly. So you're talking about back in the 90s with a video education.
I didn't want to go that far back because there's some of the members.
Which is terrific, right? It was the technology of the day.
Right.
The technology of today means that if you have a class of 14 at one school and 18 at another school, you can create an online course. So that's some of the guidelines that I think some of our schedulers are most excited about too. And then, you know, these folks who want to teach at level 4 and level 5, but it's hard to get a critical mass of students, this creates some of those options. It's important to us that these courses are taught by Bloomington Public Schools teachers, that we're not sending kids off to be taught by other students, because we have high standards that are prioritized, as you heard from our learning and teaching team. And we feel like with our staff and our learning supports department, we have the best supports for our students that can't be provided by going into an online course through another institution. So what's some of the core commonalities for our courses? They'll be interactive. We don't want to play down a course that's online versus a course that's face-to-face. We want them both to be equally interactive. We want to have a common experience so that as a student moves from one course to another, they have that common experience and that transition can be fluid. We have a great learning management system called Moodle, and so teachers have familiarity with it, students have familiarity with it. It's used in regular face-to-face classes all the time. And we think we have a teacher core that's capable and ready to grow these courses. In 17-18 then, here's what our goal is. We recruited and we got many points of interest from Bloomington teachers to be course developers. We're providing, at the central office, we're providing some coaching, some professional development, and some alignment between Kennedy and Jefferson and Community Ed and Beacon. And we're going to end, my hope is that we will be back this time next year saying that we have 13 Bloomington Public Schools online courses ready to launch for 18-19. They'll go into our course guidebooks, which happens in a November-December process. And this group is signed up and ready to go. Just as an aside, we started aspirationally in the winter thinking that we could get a prototype or 2 up and running, and then that grew into a 4 or 5, and when we saw the interest from all the different parties, it grew into the capability to get 13 courses up and running. So pretty exciting. All this work comes with teams, right? So you've heard from, you hear from teachers who are implementing and doing the hard work of NTL at the sites. We have technology teams at each site, at our community ed campus, at our early learning services campuses. Other parts of ESC like student services and the EL team, data leads, secretaries, it's really a group effort. So we put this slide in just to make sure that you know that this is an all-group effort. It's a pretty big endeavor on behalf of the district and all of these teams. What kind of questions might you have for us?
Sure, Director
Mr. Chair. Well, first of all, thank you for coming. Appreciate the presentation. Having been on the board at the beginning of this, it's interesting for me to see how it evolved over the years. I know that it's going to be a fluid process. Some things work, some things don't. The question I have that comes from, I'm sure probably more of the middle school and maybe the elementary students is, what does the process look like for some sites you can't use, they're blocked by Bloomington Public School server when the kids are on their Chromebooks. It doesn't matter if they're at home, doesn't matter if they're in school. And others, they have access to. I'm going to make an assumption that the ones that were blocked have changed over the years since it began. And what's kind of the process that you would go to? What's the criteria for if we see students trying to access YouTube 500,000 times, maybe that's one we need to look at and block, or I'm just picking on YouTube, but can you help me understand how that particular process works?
Sure. So probably about 5 years ago, we pulled together a group of leaders from sites and centrally to kind of get an idea of what is the core philosophy around what should be blocked and what should be allowed through in terms of internet access. We revisited that process this academic year with a group of people from the middle school sites, high school sites, and a couple of students who were involved, an Oak Grove student and a Kennedy student who were involved. The goal is the internet's too big to manage site by site, right? It's like cutting your grass one blade at a time. Not really our job to do that, and it's a very difficult task to do. So instead, if we can create a guiding principle, that guiding principle being, does it, number one, does it violate any laws? So we're under federal obligation to block certain things. Second, does it have, we don't try to judge whether a site has an educational purpose, but we judge whether it meets, it might have a potential learning opportunity for students. It's hard for me or any of our team to understand whether this site, which lives in the gray area, might be good in a social studies classroom or might be a good content for a health class. Health is often on the edge of these kinds of discussions. And so we try to use a least harm. That is, if it's obviously non-educational, then that's an easy block. If it's anywhere in that gray area, we try to leave it alone unless it becomes inordinately distracting. YouTube is our primary repository for teacher-created content. YouTube lives smack dab in that gray area, right? Lots of great resources there, lots of distracting resources there. In our discussions among administrators, our latest outcome was, really we're talking about, in the all, some, few analysis, we're talking about a few students who struggle with that management of free time. Let's create some processes for those few students, and let's not try to, cut the grass one blade at a time for everybody else. Does that help?
It does, and what I appreciate most is that you were able to share that, because I know that there are parents that are thinking, hey, how can I be sure my son or my daughter aren't going in that gray area or going down a rabbit hole or one click away from something that they really shouldn't be looking at. And it's encouraging to know that we continue to reassess that. Is that an appropriate characterization?
Yeah. So YouTube, for instance, releases new tools and new capabilities for administration. One of the things we did this year was we eliminated the comments area. That's a way that, as you say, we readdress it over time.
Yeah, it can be troubling for some parents, and I'll point that focus on maybe the middle school students. Just because it's brand new, they're hey, this is cool. What happens when I click here, when I go there, when I go there? But it's important, I think, that the families understand that we didn't just come up with some rules in 2013 and we haven't gone back and looked at them.
And I would just add that we, through our media program, we look at how do we proactively teach appropriate use and the impact of appropriate use. That's part of the media standard work. And then also, some kids learn by making mistakes, and so we work with our administrators and our teachers to help them learn from their mistakes too.
I know the other day my 12-year-old said, so Dad, if I want to get on Roblox at school, can I set up a proxy server at the house so I can just dial into our home computer? And then, no, that is not how you do it. So some of it might be educating parents too, like, so if your kid's got a computer running in the house and you notice that your internet's running slow, maybe all of his buddies at school are actually hooked into you to try to get around the school's systems.
It's good that he asked.
Maybe I shouldn't be saying this, so I'm giving all these kids ideas.
Great idea.
Well, this is how you do it.
Don't listen.
Yeah, don't listen to that. Can we edit that, Tom?
I'm sure Ethan and Ally never broke any of the rules.
No. Is there any other?
Here.
Okay.
So in the classroom, with the use of those, kind of a similar issue too, what do you hear from teachers? Because I know it can be very overwhelming, when you have a whole group of kids with those devices working in front of them. You don't necessarily have the time to really look at everyone and make sure that everybody is actually in the site that they're supposed to be or working, and they might end up even playing games while they're in the classroom. So do you hear anything at all about that happening in the classrooms?
I think you're describing classrooms from the start of time, whereby, teachers rule their classrooms, and so not every activity is a computer-assisted activity. It can be a non-Chromebook day. It can be a Chromebook for 20 minutes event. Managing distraction is part of the art of teaching, and creating good, engaging, and personalized lessons is the craft that our teachers are good at. So not to say that it isn't challenging, and not to say that it's not hard to get 30-some students engaged all at one time, but teachers have techniques and they share techniques for how to do that best. Bringing a change like this into a classroom, that first year, it is a transition. And so we do hear, to your question, we do hear from teachers about the bumpiness of that first year until people's games get raised with the new tools and the new availability.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your presentation. And before we continue, I just want to let our student representatives know that we have administrators and board members that are very concerned about you. And so if you need to leave to study or do whatever it is, or sleep because you have school, feel free to excuse yourself from the meeting. So thank you very much for your service this year, and we look forward to seeing you, Ethan, and we'll see you hopefully at graduation, Allie.
Yes, you will.
Right.
Don't be late.
Yeah, don't be late. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're just over halfway through, so maybe we can kick the rest in high gear. We have cooperative sponsorship for girls hockey. This one we can do in under an hour, yes?
No
Mr.
questions.
Melby?
I guarantee it.
Okay. Director Bergstrom.
Be it resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves a cooperative sponsorship for the Jefferson and Kennedy Girls Hockey Program, effective with the 2017-2018 school year.
Second?
What can you tell us about this one?
Chair Oliva, Superintendent Fujitaki, members of the board. It could be quick because it's a renewal of the cooperative agreement for girls hockey due to numbers, at the high schools and a number of participants. We've done this before. We want to continue doing it. We have to bring this one on an annual basis because of hopes of postseason competition for the girls hockey team.
Any questions? We've had this several times, similar ones like this. Now, with a team like this, can they also participate if they make a state? I know with some of the teams, they can only participate as a team up to a certain level.
Yep, this team could go all the way.
Okay.
And they will.
We sure hope so.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, and Nellie, was that an aye from you as well, just so we have it on the record? Okay. Thank you, and so that will bring us then to a cooperative sponsorship for dance.
Mr. Chair, be it resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves a cooperative sponsorship for the Kennedy and Jefferson Dance Program, effective with the 2017-2018 school year.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's very similar to the one you just approved for girls hockey, and for the same reason, for postseason competition, we bring it on an annual basis.
Any other questions?
I have
Sure.
a quick question. I'm looking at both of these different documents, and the enrollment doesn't match up. Do you have any reason why that is? Like, I'm looking on here, it looks like Kennedy students 9 through 12, 1150, but then if I look at the other one, it says Kennedy 1657, so.
When the athletic directors pull the enrollment numbers, it's at various times, and this has come up before. I follow up with them, and that's the response, but I will double-check the enrollment numbers.
Because that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
500.
500, so hopefully we didn't lose 500 kids this year for one of our high schools. Okay, that's the only question, thanks.
Just, the other one is, in both of the situations, the greater number of students, that becomes the school name team.
Correct. Yep.
Any other questions? Yeah, I'm looking at that. That's weird. Yeah, we should look into why it's so dramatically
Why
different.
we lost 500
Yeah, how we
students.
lost 500 students. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Milby.
Thank you.
Now brings us to policy reviews, and first one up is policy 533.
Be resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves revised policy 333 wellness.
533.
533 wellness, did I not say
I
that?
think you said 333, but that's okay.
Oh, 533.
I'll second that 533.
All right.
Chair Oliva, Superintendent Fujitaki, school board members, I wanted to also welcome Julie Campanelli with me. Julie works in our Learning Supports Department and championed this policy and did great work with it. The purpose, I'll just read quickly the part of the background of Policy 533 is to set forth the standards to promote student wellness and promote student health. The important part there is the wellness policy revision was developed in collaboration with parents and community members, and Julie did a great job of involving those community members, including the city of Bloomington, state of Minnesota, many parents, and internally our finance department, which included our food service. And so what you have in front of you is a policy that models the MSBA policy, as well as our district council has agreed to it, and last week it was brought in front of the policy committee, who also endorsed it. So we're excited about the changes.
Any questions? Director Bergstrom?
Well, I have to say thank you for staying this late for this particular item. Thanks for the work that you did on it. It's nice to see, I'm looking at, under wellness goals, nutrition promotion and education, physical activity, physical education, social and emotional wellness, et cetera, et cetera. This is, like Andy said, it's a large document and encompasses quite a lot. So it's nice to see that it's all in there. It's the old Prego spaghetti sauce.
Well, more of a comment, just in reading this long policy is where I learned that where our recess is taken care of, because people would always ask me, do we have a recess policy? And I was like, well, we don't have a recess policy, but then in reading this, oh, there it is, that every elementary student will have at least 20 minutes a day. So that was good to see that we have that and that our students are getting that opportunity to have those 20 minutes, because some schools are going away from recess or having less and less time. So it's good that we still value that 20 minutes of unstructured, self-choice play activity that all of our students need. So that's just my little comment.
Anybody else? A couple other things that came up in the meeting was talking about, for instance, recess was, and this is just for people listening and for the other board members for their information, is there were certain times that were prescribed, and we said, well, it shouldn't really be recess is 20 minutes, it should be recess is at least 20 minutes. So if a school wants to go above that, they won't feel like they're beyond the board policy. Or things like physical education will be, it did say initially, will be this many minutes, but instead it's at least 50 minutes. So if the school's day is structured so that way it needs to be 52 minutes or 53 minutes, then that's perfectly fine. But it shouldn't be 47. Another thing is, we can't use, according to this policy now, we can't use taking away recess as a punishment. I believe that's, if I read this correctly. So you can't say, okay, you can't have recess as a punishment. Also, one of the things, I guess I'd be guilty, well, I don't do excessive exercise for my 10-year-olds, but it'll be, yeah, you dropped the ball, do 2 push-ups. I suppose if I said do 400 push-ups, that would be excessive. But things like you can't use exercise as punishment, like, oh, you didn't do that, so now go run another mile, things like that. And then the big one, and I had fondly called this the no fun policy in the meeting, but it goes to teaching nutritional wellness in school. So not necessarily, okay, every time you do something good, you get something that's really bad for you. which is also may be extremely delicious, but we are teaching and modeling the behavior that we're expecting for long-term success in life. So I think this is a great policy. So I just wanted to share that from the meeting with the rest of the board members.
Thank you.
Yes.
Another interesting aspect of Policy 533, it has no regulations.
Yeah, the policy kind of is the
The
regulation.
whole thing is just all policy about the various aspects of wellness and everything else like that.
It's a great read.
Which is really tough for the board to have to understand that whole policy. Anyhow,
So is there-
I move that we move along.
Move along, okay. Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much for all your hard work on this. It took a couple of years to come up with this, right? A year? All right. So revised policy 542.
Be it resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves revised policy 542, legal name.
Okay.
That's my spot.
We have the,
Eric Melby and Jenna Mitchell.
Policy 542, legal name, is a pretty succinct policy. Hadn't been updated since 2008, I believe, so the purpose was tightened up as we're doing with a lot of our purpose statements and our policies, and really not a whole lot of change to the substance of the general statement of policy.
Any questions, sir?
just a point of clarification, that on the back, the purpose says that to set requirements for legal name of a child enrolled in the district. So it's not the district's legal name, it's a student.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So are you suggesting we should edit the title of the policy to say student legal name?
I don't know. What are you thinking there, David? It just seemed a little ambiguous when we read
Like
legal name,
of the
and then
district or
on the
student,
back it
yeah.
said it's the student's legal name. I don't know, at this late date, do we need to?
Legal counsel has signed off on this, but
Yeah, I'm not sure what the title matters much. I mean, the policy talks about the student's legal name.
Yeah,
So,
I'm good with that.
good enough? Okay. Any other?
No, and it should be in the section of students anyway, so it's kind of.
Yeah, it'll be in
It's
the
in the
students,
500
yeah.
series.
Yeah. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that'll bring us to policy 616.
Be resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves policy 616, school district system accountability.
Second?
Thank you, Chair Leva, Superintendent Fujitaki, members of the board. Happy to have Dr. Mitchell with me here tonight to go through the rest of these policies with you all. She's been very helpful in updating these policies. I'm fortunate that she's working on some licensure things and needs hours. So she's done a great job helping with this. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Mitchell.
Thanks, Eric. Happy to help. So this policy 616, school district system accountability, is a new policy we'll be adopting, and this policy you see in front of you has been adopted from MSBA. A couple of the changes that we've made to that MSBA policy I just want to mention to you. The first is on page 1, we've adopted some of the district-specific language. The policy originally through MSBA mentions a curriculum review cycle, just quite generically. We mention our foundational curriculum review cycle, which is the cycle you've seen on 2 different slides tonight, same cycle on both slides. So we made that adjustment. I also want to draw your attention just to page 2. There's 2 other locations where we've changed some of the language so that it matches the district's language. So under A for school district goals, number 1, originally it just mentioned district goals. We have here the pathways milestones called out, making it district specific. And then also under C, implementation of curriculum, we, according to the World's Best Workforce State Statute, 120B11, we have to have a district advisory committee, and we have one called Pathways Advisory Committee, PAC. So that's called out specifically with language in C1. The other thing that I wanted to just quickly draw your attention to is in the regulation. You'll see there's quite a bit of language around Pathways Advisory Committee. It's quite thorough. This is actually language that was taken directly from a policy we've had prior, policy 603, called Pathways Advisory Committee. This information falls under school district system accountability, and the MSBA policy notes that there should be a parent advisory committee and community Community Advisory Committee. So that's why we're recommending to move that pathways information to this policy as a regulation. So the language is unchanged. It's just taking policy 603 and moving it as a regulation here within 616. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them.
So the idea is that since the Pathways Advisory Committee is sort of set in statute anyways, it makes sense that the operation of that would fall under regulations here?
Right.
Okay. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, passes. So that brings us to deleting policy 603.
Be resolved, the School Board of Independent School District deletes current policy 603, Pathways Advisory Committee.
Second.
And since we just put it in the regulation of 616, this probably makes sense that we just go along with it. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I don't, no.
Okay, any questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. New policy 603.
Okay, be resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves new policy 603, curriculum development.
Second.
Okay, turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. So MSBA recommends, or requires, I should say, a policy 603, curriculum development. So seeing as we've deleted the past 603, our recommendation would be to adopt MSBA's policy 603, curriculum development. And so the policy you're looking at is adopted from MSBA with, again, just a couple of changes to language to make it more district specific. So you see under the general statement policy, the last line there, originally MSBA just calls out personal plans for students. We call out our personal growth plans, PGP, because that's something that's specific to our district. And again, under number 4, responsibility, B, we have our Pathways Advisory Committee, which is called out specifically. And then the last change to language is on page 2 under C. The MSBA policy was a bit old and mentioned No Child Left Behind, so we removed that language from C6 so that it reads that it must meet the applicable requirements of the Minnesota Department of Education.
Any
What
questions? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, and that takes us to the last policy, 513.1.
Be resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves revised policy 513.1, granting of credits.
Second.
So this policy is pretty much unchanged from the way that it was before. There aren't any major edits. This is a policy we've had in place in the past. One thing that we've done is just make some simple edits to formatting to make it in alignment with the other policies that we have. So under the statement of the policy, in the past we had District 271. Our format is that we removed 271. So simple things like that to just say the district believes. The other thing that we made a change to with this policy is under general statement of policy, the second paragraph. Before, there was a sentence right in the middle that said, in our school system, learning is defined by standards. And as you've heard several times tonight through the curriculum review presentations, our granting of credits isn't really just based on standards. It's based on students gaining proficiency of the standards, right? Mastering the standards. So we added that language in just to clarify a little bit to make it say, in our school system, learning as defined by gaining proficiency of the standards. And those are the two more major changes that we've made to this policy. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
And we already did advisory team update. Let's talk about school board goals.
Hey, Mr. Chair, be it resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves its goals for the 2017-2018 school year. And at a retreat, we did discuss them, and the goals are attached as follows. I will not read all of them. You all should have them memorized by now.
I do.
Was there any other discussion that we wanted to have about our board goals that we discussed at the retreat? Stated here. Doesn't look like anything's changed, so. That would be pretty sneaky of you, if you change all our goals to see if we're looking. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that'll bring us to superintendent goals.
It resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 271 approves the superintendent goals for the 2017-2018 school year.
Second.
Okay, Mark, at the fifth retreat, we discussed the goals, and part of the process, the board discussed the superintendent's goal line his work with that of the boards to accomplish the board goals. So the document is also attached for your review.
Turn over to superintendent.
Okay, thank you. The proposed 17-18 goals are aligned with the superintendent's major roles. The first would be to support the board in achieving their goals and their goal statements, multiple goal statements for each role, and there's quantitative measures for each goal statement. And I'll just highlight some of the goal statements. For the board achieving the goals, first would be assure the continuation of the operating referendum. It's of major importance. The second, under that rule, would be review the strategic plan and update it as needed. As you recall, the strategic plan prioritizes the use of limited resources, and in the past, we made choices on how we invest our resources. One thing that we may want to talk about is this language immersion program that was discussed tonight. We have other priorities. We have to see where that need ranks with other priorities that the board has already established. Make sense? Okay, the next thing is we need to bring to life the strategic vision. So the first thing we've talked about is vision metrics and milestone metrics. We already have those. We need to review that with the board on a regular basis. And we have the three-component framework that drives us toward our vision. And we have plans and targets for each one of those. And we review that with the board on a regular basis. And that measures our progress toward our vision, which is the pathways to graduation. The third role would be coming up with programming or pathway development. And we have two major processes underway. One would be to update our college and career pathways. Another would be update our early childhood pathways. As far as community engagement, it's been suggested we explore developing advisory teams for other units. And another one would be strengthening our career college relationships. Recently, I'll give you an example of work that needs to be done. The executive director of Chamber of Commerce of Bloomington just resigned. That's a major setback for us, and we're going to have to go out and develop more connections there. That's just a recent development. So, and as far as the last one is policy-related, regulation development, and an example of regulation work that needs to be done would be on the facility use that was discussed tonight. So those are the major area goals, proposals for this coming year.
Thank you for that. Any questions from board members?
I like the change that you put in there to explore using the advisory team concept with other units, because I think we can all be thankful of the successes that it's had so far, and we need to hear from other people besides just teachers, because, we want to hear from the paras and the administrators and everybody, cooks, everybody. So if we can do more communicating with more parts of our staff, the better.
Right.
I think it'd be. So I think that's a good addition.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's it. Thank you. That'll bring us to board member reports. Who'd like to start us off? Director Sorum.
Mr. Chair, and a board report from the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee that we have finished the evaluation form, and with just a couple of things, we'll be emailing that out, I guess, start of next week, so that we can get the thing finished around the 1st of June, so that we can start our evaluation, start our evaluations.
So just quick, so the policy committee, we met a couple weeks ago, and just keeping you guys all up to date on where we're at. We've I think tonight makes 25 policies that we've passed, and our goal was 20, and we actually have added another policy committee meeting on June 1st, where we're going to be discussing, I think, about 7 or 8 more policies. So we should have more than 30 policies that we've reviewed or taken action on this year, so well ahead of our goal. And then the other thing, real quick, is last Wednesday, I was able to make it to Normandale Hills for a 5K with the Girls on the Run, and my daughter is in the Girls on the Run. And so I was her running buddy, and it was, as soon as we started, it started pouring. I mean, like, really, really hard pouring. And I thought it was quite amazing that none of the girls quit, although we all continued through it, and it was kind of like we jumped in a swimming pool and kept on running. And it was a lot of fun, you know. I'd rather run in rain than heat any day. So just wanted to share that quickly. And that's it.
Mr. Chair? As we get a little bit closer to the close of our, what I would consider another successful school year, I want to say thanks to all of our talented food service staff. Got a few stats that I want to toss your way just to digest. Over the last 2 years, they have served 435,071 breakfasts.
Wow.
And 1,049,650 lunches. That comes to a total of 1,484,721 meals. This number does not include the summer meal program. We do have meals available to students over the summer. You know, food service, I don't think it's always spoken of in glamorous terms, certainly not from students. But I know that our food service workers, the energy and the effort that they put into that particular, it's a moving target. Federal regulations say we need to have this many carbs, this many calories, this much whole grain, et cetera, and they do the very best they can to make sure that our kids have something that's tasty, different offerings. I know they listen to the students and they tweak the offerings as the year goes by. So just want to say a quick shout out to all the folks in all of our kitchens and all the people in offices that never get this kind of recognition. Just a quick thanks. Had the opportunity to participate in the mock interview program. This particular program is put on in conjunction with Kennedy and Jefferson and the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. We get business people that volunteer 2 hours of their time. They come in and listen to students who come prepared to do a pretend interview. They write a resume for a job that they'd like to have. The two that I had were, there was one student wanted to be a elementary school teacher, and another one wanted to be in, I'm blocking out on the, anyways, that they were two very well-written interviews, applications. We have 25 minutes to go over with them. There's 15 minutes where you go through the interview. There's 10 minutes where they can ask us questions, and then the remaining time is for follow-up and feedback for these students. And I've done it for, I want to say 3 years, if not 4. Jim was there, and he understands just how much, first of all, how much fun it is for the people that are doing the interviews, but I think the kids get a ton out of it. And it's a wonderful program. I want to say thanks to everybody who makes this particular program available to our students. And each one of them that comes in when they leave, at least when they tell me, it was never what they expected. It was always better. It wasn't as scary or you know, I'm sure they've made a mountain out of a molehill in their minds, thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. But these kids handled themselves really well. So the teachers had them well prepared. Last thing, I had a chance to stop in at Oak Grove Presbyterian Church. This was last Friday. It was after our centennial celebration, which I thought went off really well and was well received by at least 500 people. I stopped over at Oak Grove Presbyterian to check in on the kids that were there for Box City Vigil. Box City Vigil is hosted by Bloomington United for Youth, and it's a 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning program. It's over at Oak Grove Presbyterian. I think they work with the short line rail to make sure that no trains actually are moving after 7 and before 7. And it is a rain or shine event. And it started raining at 4 o'clock in the morning, but the kids put together, they have a bunch of cardboard, they put together a shelter for the evening. There's some entertainment there, there's some food there. But the kids do this to raise awareness for homelessness. And I do have some statistics here. On any given night in Minnesota, 2,500 youth and adult are homeless. And I'm sure that number has gone up. I think this was a 2010 or a 2013 statistic. But what these students do is share the opportunity to raise awareness for homelessness. So it was a great event. I want to say thanks to all those that made this particular event possible, and it continues to be a successful evening. And that's all I have.
Right.
I just want to mention, I went to the Valley View Middle Avid program along with quite a few other of my fellow board members. Always a fun thing to watch the kids give us their goals and their hopes for their futures, so. I also want to mention the Centennial Celebration. Thank you all for attending. It was there. It was a great event, I think. Everybody had a good time, so.
Yes. So, yeah, I wanted to congratulate the Education Foundation and Marine especially for helping us out with the Centennial Celebration. It was a great event, so, yeah.
Glad y'all came.
Thanks for that. Is there any other, oh, yeah, superintendent report, I almost forgot. Oh, I thought we were going to get out of here.
I'm going to keep it short. Thank you, Chair Oliva. We're 2 hours away from the statutory adjournment of the state legislative session. I've been watching the internet for leaks and information about what's happening. It seems like we're heading for a special session. We're running out of runway here. There are 10 major budget areas that are up for approval. 5 have been approved, but there's 5 small ones. The big ones are still sitting out there. There's a big gap between the two, the executive branch and the legislature, so it looks as though we're heading for a special session. That's a problem, because then we won't have any information on which to really start building a budget. But hopefully they'll go into special session. Hopefully they'll reach some agreements tonight and then go into special session just to wrap things up. That's the best case scenario. So, that's it.
That's it. Is there anything else to come before the board? All right.
It's graduation.
It's graduation. We have graduation coming up, so we'll see you all there. You have your caps and gowns, or actually, we don't have caps. We have your gowns all ironed and pressed. Okay, thank you. I'll call this meeting adjourned.
Okay. Thank you.
So we doing like we did last year, riding buses, or we kind of like on our own to get down there, or?